He left her at the altar, 6 months pregnant, to be with his mistress. Years later, when they reunited, he felt his bones tremble in front of the woman he had abandoned. Absolutely fucking not. Trent Burnett's voice cut through the conference room like a blade. He leaned forward, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the polished mahogany table. The 5 men in tailored suits shifted uncomfortably as Trent tapped his Mont Blanc pen against the contract proposal. You think I didn't notice the easement clause on page 37? That waterfront access is worth $8 million alone. His green eyes fixed on Harold Meyer, the silver-haired developer across the table. You're trying to lowball me by 15% and sneak in backdoor access to the marina. Try again. Harold cleared his throat. Trent, be reasonable. The Embarcadero project needs... What it needs, Trent interrupted, standing up, is someone who recognizes its actual value. You have until tomorrow morning to come back with a serious offer, or I'm calling Westridge Capital. He buttoned his custom Tom Ford jacket with a practiced flick. Their CEO has been blowing up my phone all week. As the meeting adjourned and hands were reluctantly shaken, Trent's assistant Dana slipped him a note. Your father called. 3rd time today. Trent crumpled the paper and tossed it into the trash with perfect aim. Tell him I'm in meetings until next week. Outside the Burnett Pacific headquarters, San Francisco's financial district pulsed with energy under the late September sun. Trent nodded at the valet, who immediately sprinted for his Aston Martin. His phone buzzed with a text from Dana. Meyer's assistant called. They're reconsidering the terms. Meeting set for 8 a.m. A smile played across Trent's face as he slid into the driver's seat. He always won. It was simply a matter of knowing when to push and when to walk away. His father had taught him that much, even if their methods differed. Listen to the rain, how it speaks to us, Melody Hartwell said softly, as 20 pairs of young eyes watched her with rapt attention. The elementary school classroom windows streamed with October drizzle as she tapped a gentle rhythm on her djembe drum. Can you hear its pattern? Let's try to match it. The circle of 8-year-olds tentatively began tapping on their small percussion instruments. A boy with thick glasses and a serious expression struggled to find the beat. Melody knelt beside him. Listen with your heart, not just your ears, Jamie, she whispered, guiding his hands. There you go. Perfect. The boy's face transformed with a smile of pure joy as he joined the rhythm. Melody caught the eye of her teaching assistant, who gave her a thumbs up. These were the moments that sustained her, when music bridged gaps that words couldn't cross. After class, Principal Garcia stopped by. The board loved your proposal for the expanded music therapy program, Melody, especially for our trauma-affected students. That's wonderful. Melody tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. When can we start? That's the thing, Garcia sighed. Funding. We need about 30,000 more. Melody's smile dimmed, but didn't disappear. I'll figure something out. These kids need this. Walking to her modest apartment in the Mission District, Melody heard her phone chime. Her friend Harper had sent a text. Don't forget, Children's Arts Foundation Gala tonight. Wear that green dress that makes your eyes pop. Lots of rich donors who need to fund your program. Melody grimaced. Networking events made her uncomfortable, all that superficial small talk and self-promotion. But for her kids, she'd endure anything, even an evening of champagne and chandelier-lit pretension. The Palace Hotel's grand ballroom glittered with San Francisco's elite. Melody felt out of place in her emerald dress, the nicest thing she owned, but nowhere near the designer gowns surrounding her. Harper, confident in her element as an interior designer to the wealthy, guided her toward the open bar. Liquid courage, Harper insisted, handing her a glass of champagne. And there's Thomas Chen, the tech billionaire who loves music education. Let's go introduce you. As Harper began her pitch to Chen, Melody felt someone watching her. She turned to find a tall man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo, studying her with curious intensity. Unlike the forced smiles plastered on most faces in the room, his expression held genuine interest. You look like you're plotting your escape, he said, his voice warm with amusement. Melody laughed, despite herself. Is it that obvious? Only to a fellow prisoner. He extended his hand. Trent Burnett. Melody Hartwell. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not domineering. You don't seem like the type who gets trapped at charity events. I could say the same about you. You're clearly not one of the usual suspects. His eyes, remarkably green, assessed her with refreshing directness. "So what brings you into this lion's den?" "I'm a music teacher trying to fund a therapy program for traumatized children." The words tumbled out before she could dress them up in something more sophisticated. Instead of the polite nod and swift exit she expected, Trent's face lit with genuine interest. "Tell me more." For 20 minutes they stood in their own bubble as Melody explained her work. She found herself gesturing animatedly, forgetting her surroundings completely. Trent asked intelligent questions that suggested he was actually listening. "Sorry," she finally said. "I've been monopolizing the conversation." "Don't apologize. It's refreshing to hear someone talk about something real." His smile created a small dimple in his left cheek. "Most conversations here revolve around property values and which private school has the most prestigious waiting list." "Speaking from experience?" "Unfortunately, yes. I'm in real estate development." "Ah, you build things." "I transform things," he corrected. "Take something undervalued and reveal its potential." The passion in his voice surprised her. "You sound like you actually care about your work. Is that so strange?" "No, just unexpected. I imagined developers were mainly interested in profit margins." Instead of being offended, he laughed. "Most are. But the best projects do both. Make money and make a difference." He pulled out a business card. "Your program sounds valuable. Let me make a few calls." As he walked away, Harper materialized at her side. "Holy shit. Do you know who that was?" "Trent Burnett. He seems nice." Harper's eyes widened. "Nice? He's the Trent Burnett." His family practically built half of San Francisco, and he's known as the most ruthless negotiator in Bay Area real estate. Melody glanced at his retreating figure, now surrounded by people vying for his attention. "Ruthless? He didn't seem that way. Trust me, they don't call him the shark for nothing. But if he's interested in your program, that's huge. His foundation gives major grants." Melody fingered his business card, wondering which version of Trent Burnett was real. The attentive, passionate man she'd just met, or the predatory businessman of his reputation. 3 days later, Melody received an email from the Burnett Family Foundation. Her program had received a $50,000 grant. Attached was a personal note. "Looking forward to seeing how you transform these kids' lives. Dinner to discuss details. TB." Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant in North Beach, far from the business district's power lunch spots. Trent arrived without pretense, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. Over pasta and wine, they discovered unexpected common ground. Both loved old jazz, had complicated relationships with ambitious fathers, and believed in the healing power of creation. "Why music therapy?" he asked as they shared tiramisu. "Music was my lifeline as a kid. My parents divorced when I was 9, and I stopped speaking for almost a year." She traced the rim of her wineglass. "My teacher gave me a recorder, and suddenly I had a voice again." Trent's expression softened. "That's why you're so good with the kids. You've been where they are." "Not exactly where some of them are. Many have experienced traumas I can barely imagine." She met his gaze. "But music gives them what it gave me, a way to express what feels inexpressible." As he walked her to her door, their conversation flowed without effort. When he finally kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, not presumptuous. Melody felt something unexpected unfurl within her, a recognition of something genuine amid San Francisco's often superficial social landscape. Over the next 3 months, they navigated their differences with surprising ease. Trent showed her his world, exclusive restaurants, gallery openings, weekend trips to wine country, while she introduced him to hers, community music events, hidden neighborhood gems, and eventually her classroom, where he sat in the back and watched her teach with undisguised admiration. "You're different with them," he told her afterward. "More yourself." "What do you mean?" "Like you don't have to think about who you're supposed to be. You just are." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I envy that." "You're not yourself with me?" she asked, half joking. His answer held unexpected vulnerability. "I'm more myself with you than with anyone, but I've spent so long being what others expect that sometimes I'm not sure where the performance ends." On a rainy Thursday in February, Trent sat in his downtown office, reviewing architectural plans for the new Embarcadero development when his intercom buzzed. "Ms. Chambers is here for your tour," Dana announced. Trent straightened his tie. "Send her in." Astrid Chambers entered with the confidence of someone who knew her worth to the decimal point. Tall and striking, with precisely styled blonde hair and a tailored charcoal suit, she carried herself with practiced poise. "The great Trent Burnett," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Your reputation precedes you, as does yours. Your work on the Seattle waterfront revitalization was impressive." "Flattery?" She arched a perfect eyebrow. "I expected tougher negotiation tactics." "It's not flattery if it's true, and we haven't started negotiating yet." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Tell me why I should hire your firm for this project when Keller and Associates has been my go-to for a decade." For the next hour, Astrid presented her vision for the Embarcadero property with razor-sharp precision. Her designs were innovative yet practical, bold yet respectful of the area's historical significance. Most importantly, she anticipated his questions before he asked them. "You've done your homework," he acknowledged. "I never enter a room unprepared." She closed her portfolio. "Especially when the stakes are this high. The committee meets next week. I'll let you know." "You'll choose my firm," she said with calm certainty as she stood to leave. "Because you recognize ambition when you see it. We're cut from the same cloth, you and I." As the door closed behind her, Trent found himself unsettled by her assessment. There was something familiar in her calculated confidence, something that mirrored aspects of himself he'd been questioning since meeting Melody. That evening, over dinner at Melody's apartment, he struggled to stay present. The architect's words echoed in his mind. "Cut from the same cloth." "Earth to Trent," Melody teased, waving her hand in front of his face. "You've been somewhere else all night." "Sorry, big project decisions." She tilted her head, studying him. "It's more than that. Something's bothering you." This was what simultaneously drew him to Melody and unnerved him, her ability to see past his carefully constructed facade. No one in his world did that. They accepted the version of Trent Burnett he presented because it was easier, more comfortable. "Just thinking about something someone said today," he admitted. "About who I am." "And who's that?" "Someone driven by ambition above all else." Melody considered this as she refilled their wine glasses. "That's part of you, sure, but not all of you." She curled her legs beneath her on the couch. "I see how you light up when you talk about rehabilitating old buildings, how you remember my students' names, how you call your mother every Sunday, even though you pretend it's a chore." She reached for his hand. "You contain multitudes, Trent Burnett. Don't let anyone reduce you to just one thing." Later, as they lay in bed, Trent watched Melody sleep. Her words had touched something profound in him, a hunger to be seen fully and accepted anyway. With her, he glimpsed a different version of himself, one not defined solely by achievement and acquisition. It terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. 2 weeks later, Trent called Astrid's firm with his decision. "Congratulations. The committee was impressed with your vision. The contract is yours." "Excellent. We should discuss details over dinner. I'll have Dana set up a meeting at my office next week." "I was thinking somewhere more conducive to creative conversation. Say Aquarello Friday at 8? Trent hesitated. The suggestion crossed professional boundaries, but that wasn't unusual in his world, where business and social lines often blurred. "Friday works. I'll see you there." At dinner, Astrid was all business, until the second bottle of wine. As they discussed the project, her comments became more personal, her looks more lingering. When she touched his hand to emphasize a point, the contact lasted a beat too long. "We should continue this conversation somewhere more private," she suggested, her voice dropping. "My apartment is nearby." Warning bells sounded in Trent's mind. He thought of Melody, who trusted him in a way no one else ever had. "I should get going." "Early meeting tomorrow." Astrid's smile didn't falter. "Of course, another time." Over the next month, their professional interactions remained charged with unspoken possibility. Trent maintained boundaries, but found himself thinking about Astrid at unexpected moments. Her incisive mind, her ambition that matched his own, the challenge she represented. Then came Denver, a 3-day conference where they were both speakers. After their panels, celebratory drinks with colleagues turned into a private nightcap in the hotel bar. 1 drink became 3. Conversation flowed with dangerous ease between 2 people who understood the language of power and ambition. "Your girlfriend?" Astrid said, swirling her scotch. "She's a music teacher?" "Yes, she works with children who've experienced trauma. Noble, and completely different from your world." Trent stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just an observation." She must find your life quite educational. If you're implying she's with me because of my money, not at all. I'm sure she's lovely. Astrid leaned closer. But does she understand what drives you? Really understand? Or does she love a version of you that you're trying to be for her? The question hit uncomfortably close to his private doubts. Before he could respond, Astrid continued, "The difference between us, Trent, is that I see you clearly. No illusions, no idealizations, just recognition." As they rode the elevator up, the tension between them was palpable. When they reached her floor, she stepped out, then turned. "Nightcap in my room, just to finish our conversation." Every instinct told him to decline, to return to his room and call Melody, to hold fast to the man he was becoming with her. Instead, he followed Astrid down the hallway. Back in San Francisco, Melody hummed as she prepared dinner in her apartment. Trent would be home from his conference tonight, and she'd planned his favorite meal. Her phone chimed with a text from him. "Flight landed. Can't wait to see you. Missed you." She smiled, adding a heart emoji to her reply. 3 months together, and still butterflies. It was early, but everything about their relationship felt right in a way she couldn't articulate, as if they balanced each other perfectly. His drive complementing her compassion, her authenticity grounding his ambition. Harper remained skeptical. "Just be careful," she'd warned last week over coffee. "Men like Trent Burnett don't change their spots." "You don't know him like I do," Melody had defended. "There's so much more to him than his reputation." Now, setting the table, she realized how much she believed that. Past relationships had always felt like compromises, pieces of herself tucked away to make things work. With Trent, paradoxically, she felt more completely herself. Across town, in a discreetly upscale apartment building near the financial district, Trent checked his watch. He had 2 hours before he was due at Melody's. "You're thinking about her," Astrid observed from the bed. Trent buttoned his shirt, avoiding her gaze. "I should go. Yet here you are again." She stood, wrapping the sheet around her body. "This is the 3rd time since Denver. If you were going to end it, you would have. This is a mistake." "Is it? Or is it the most honest thing you've done in months?" She approached him, letting the sheet drop. "Stop lying to yourself, Trent. You can play house with your sweet teacher, pretend you're becoming some better version of yourself. But this," she gestured between them, "this is who you really are." As he kissed her, Trent felt something fracture inside him, the growing divide between the man he wanted to be with Melody and the man he'd always been. Each moment with Astrid pulled him back to familiar territory, where power, desire, and ambition intertwined in a dance he knew by heart. Later, as he drove to Melody's apartment, he practiced compartmentalization, a skill inherited from his father, perfected over years of high-stakes negotiations. By the time he knocked on her door, his smile was genuine, his embrace warm. "I missed you," he said, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Tell me everything about Denver," she said, leading him inside. Her apartment glowed with candlelight, the table set beautifully for their reunion dinner. And so he did, editing the narrative, reshaping the truth into something palatable. All the while, his phone sat in his pocket with messages from Astrid, insistent, knowing, a silent counterpoint to the carefully constructed evening. As Melody reached for his hand across the table, her eyes full of trust and affection, Trent felt the weight of his duplicity. Yet beneath the guilt lay something more disturbing, a thrill at navigating these dual worlds, at being desired in such different ways by such different women. "I have something to tell you," Melody said, her expression softening. Trent froze, irrationally certain she somehow knew. "What is it?" Her smile was radiant as she squeezed his hand. "The school board approved full funding for my program. Children from across the district will have access to music therapy now." Relief flooded him, followed immediately by genuine happiness for her. "That's incredible. We should celebrate." "There's more," she said, her voice quieter now. "They're creating a permanent position, Director of Therapeutic Arts. They've asked me to build something that could become a model for other districts." "Melody, that's amazing. You deserve this." Her eyes shimmered. "It feels like everything's falling into place. My work and us." She looked down, suddenly shy. "I know it's only been a few months, but I've never felt this way before. Like I've found my person." The words hung in the air between them, honest and exposed. Trent felt a surge of conflicting emotions, tenderness for her openness, shame at his deception, and beneath it all, fear. Fear that he would ruin this, as he'd ruined every relationship before. Fear that he wasn't capable of being the man she believed him to be. Fear that Astrid was right, that his true self was the one that followed her down that hotel hallway in Denver, not the one sitting across from Melody now. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Another message from Astrid. Another world pulling at him. "You're my person too," he heard himself say, the words both true and false in the same breath, the first notes in a symphony of betrayal that would eventually shatter more than just Melody's heart. The double life began as a series of small decisions. A dinner meeting with Astrid that ran late, a weekend business trip that included a night at her lake house, a phone call taken in the bathroom while Melody slept next door. With each transgression, Trent told himself it would be the last time. Each morning after seeing Astrid, he would wake filled with resolve to end it. But then she would call with a project emergency, and he would find himself at her apartment, their architectural discussions inevitably ending in her bed. "You're distracted," Astrid observed one evening as she traced patterns on his bare chest. They lay in her minimalist bedroom overlooking the Bay Bridge, the city lights creating shifting patterns on the ceiling. "Just thinking about the zoning commission meeting tomorrow." "Liar." She propped herself up on one elbow. "You're thinking about her." Trent sat up, reaching for his discarded shirt. "I need to go." "You always need to go, yet you always come back." Astrid's voice carried no judgment, only cool assessment. "How long do you think you can keep this up? This isn't a conversation I want to have, because you've convinced yourself this is temporary, a momentary weakness?" She laughed softly. "We both know what this is, Trent. The question is when you'll admit it to yourself." He finished dressing in silence. Astrid watched him, her expression unreadable in the half-light. "She can't give you what I can," she said as he reached the door. "She doesn't understand your world." Trent paused. "And what world is that?" "The real one, where power matters, where weakness is exploited, where people like us make things happen, while people like her sing songs and hope for the best." The cruelty of her assessment made him flinch, yet he couldn't summon a defense. Instead, he left without responding, her words following him like shadows. Across town, Melody sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by sheet music. Her new program had expanded to 5 schools, and keeping track of the specialized curriculum for each child's needs required meticulous organization. A key turned in the lock, and Trent entered carrying takeout bags from her favorite Thai restaurant. "You're a lifesaver," she said, clearing space among her papers. "I completely forgot about dinner." Figured as much. He bent to kiss her, inhaling the faint scent of markers and coffee that always clung to her after a long day of teaching. "How's the program going?" As they ate, Melody described her latest breakthrough with a 9-year-old boy who'd witnessed domestic violence. He hasn't spoken in months, but today he played the drums. Actually played them, with rhythm and everything. Trent watched her face animate with passion, her hands gesturing as she spoke. These moments, seeing her entirely absorbed in her work, untainted by cynicism despite the trauma she encountered daily, made him ache with a complex mixture of admiration and unworthiness. "I've been meaning to ask," she said, changing subjects. "The fundraiser gala next month, will your parents be there? I should probably meet them before." She trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. They hadn't discussed the future explicitly, yet their relationship had gained an unstated momentum, carrying them forward towards something serious. "My mother will be there," Trent said carefully. "My father rarely attends charity events unless he's receiving an award." "Oh," Melody studied his expression. "You never talk much about him." "Not much to say. Desmond Burnett built an empire. Expects everyone to acknowledge his greatness. End of story." "And what does he expect from you?" Trent set down his fork. "Filial obedience, continuation of the dynasty, the usual." "Is that why you work so hard to prove yourself? To earn his approval?" The question hit too close to truths Trent avoided examining. "I work hard because excellence matters." Melody didn't press further, but her perceptiveness unnerved him. She saw connections he preferred to keep separate, between his driving ambition and his father's withholding nature, between his need for control and his fear of vulnerability. Later that night, lying beside her in the darkness, Trent faced an uncomfortable realization. With Astrid, he could be the person his father had groomed him to be. Strategic, unyielding, focused on conquest. With Melody, he glimpsed a different possibility, someone guided by connection rather than acquisition. The problem was, he didn't know which version was real. "You look like shit," Harper Reed declared, setting down her coffee cup with theatrical emphasis. She'd insisted on meeting Melody for their weekly breakfast, despite a looming design deadline. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Melody pushed her eggs around her plate, stomach too unsettled to eat. "Seriously, what's going on? You're pale as a ghost." Melody glanced around the busy cafe before leaning forward. "I'm late." Harper's eyes widened. Late, as in 3 weeks, and I'm never late." "Holy shit, have you taken a test?" 3, all positive." Harper reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified, excited, confused." Melody's voice dropped to a whisper. "We haven't even talked about marriage or children yet. It's only been 7 months. What about Trent? Have you told him?" Melody shook her head. "I wanted to be sure first. I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon." "And?" Harper studied her friend's face. "What do you think he'll say?" "I don't know. Sometimes he seems all in, talking about future plans, asking about my 5-year goals. Other times, he's somewhere else entirely, like he's calculating escape routes. That's men for you, especially rich, powerful ones with daddy issues." Harper's tone softened. "But he does love you. Anyone can see that. Can they?" Melody's uncertainty spilled through. "Sometimes I feel like I'm seeing only the parts of himself he wants me to see." "Listen to me." Harper leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I was skeptical of him at first. You know that, but I've watched him with you. The way he looks at you when you're not paying attention, that's real." Melody wanted desperately to believe this. "I hope you're right, because either way everything's about to change." That evening, Trent arrived at Melody's apartment to find her sitting quietly at the kitchen table. The room was dimly lit, a single candle flickering between them. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "Did I forget an anniversary?" "No." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I just need to talk to you about something." He sat down, loosening his tie. "Sounds serious." "It is." She took a deep breath. "There's no easy way to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I'm pregnant." The words hung between them, altering the very air in the room. Trent felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him, leaving him suspended in free fall. "Pregnant," he repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. "Almost 8 weeks." Her eyes never left his face, searching for his reaction. "I just found out for sure today." 1,000 thoughts collided in Trent's mind. Images of his own distant father, memories of childhood loneliness in their echoing mansion, the weight of expectation that had shaped his every decision. And cutting through it all, the reality of Astrid, the compartmentalized part of his life that now threatened to collapse everything. "Say something," Melody whispered, her voice tight with vulnerability. In that moment, looking at her across the table, this woman who had somehow slipped past his defenses and awakened parts of himself he'd long buried, Trent made a choice. "This is," he began, then stood and walked around the table to kneel beside her chair. He took her hands in his. "This is unexpected, but not unwelcome." Relief flooded her face. "Really? Really?" He surprised himself with the truth in his words. "We'll figure this out together." As he held her, Trent made a silent vow to end things with Astrid immediately, to commit fully to Melody and their child, to become the man she believed him to be. It was a vow he meant with every fiber of his being. In that moment. "Absolutely not." Desmond Burnett's voice boomed across his mahogany-paneled office. At 65, he remained an imposing figure, 6'2" with a full head of silver hair and the ramrod posture of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "I didn't ask for your permission," Trent replied, keeping his voice level. "I'm telling you out of courtesy." "Courtesy?" Desmond's laugh was short and hard. "You get some schoolteacher pregnant and expect me to congratulate you? Where's the courtesy in saddling yourself with this kind of responsibility in the middle of the Embarcadero negotiations?" Trent had expected this reaction, but the dismissive way his father referred to Melody still ignited his anger. "Her name is Melody. She's going to be your daughter-in-law and the mother of your grandchild. For now." Desmond stood, moving to the window overlooking his empire, the San Francisco skyline dotted with Burnett Pacific properties. "I've seen this before. You get infatuated, make grand gestures, then realize you've trapped yourself. This is different. Is it? His father turned, fixing him with the penetrating stare that had intimidated business opponents for decades. Tell me the truth. If she wasn't pregnant, would you be proposing marriage after less than a year? The question struck its target. Trent remained silent. That's what I thought. Desmond returned to his desk. Handle it however you want. Just keep it from affecting the business. The Chen Group is watching our every move, looking for signs of weakness. Is that all family means to you? A business consideration? Family is business, son. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. As Trent left his father's office, the weight of legacy pressed down on him. Desmond had built Burnett Pacific from nothing, transforming a single apartment building into a real estate empire through sheer force of will and a ruthless ability to seize opportunity. He'd raised Trent to do the same, to see the world as a chessboard where sentiment was a liability. For years, Trent had followed that blueprint unquestioningly. Meeting Melody had changed something fundamental in his understanding of what made a life worthwhile. And now, with a child on the way, the stakes of this internal conflict had risen exponentially. His phone vibrated with a text from Astrid. Need to see you. Urgent. He stared at the message, his earlier resolution wavering. Just one more meeting to end things properly, he told himself. One final conversation to close that chapter cleanly before beginning his new life with Melody. He typed a quick response. My office, 5 p.m. Married. Astrid's voice was deadly quiet. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of Trent's office, the afternoon sun casting her sharp profile in silhouette. You're actually going through with this? It's not a matter of going through with it, I'm choosing this. Because of the pregnancy. It wasn't a question, but a cold assessment. How predictably conventional of you. This isn't about convention. It's about taking responsibility. Responsibility? She turned to face him fully. Tell me something, Trent. When you're with her, playing the devoted partner, do you think about me, about us, about how perfectly matched we are in every way that matters? The truth was, he did, more often than he cared to admit. There was an electric understanding between him and Astrid, a recognition of similar ambitions and drives. With Melody, he was constantly aware of their differences, the adjustments required to bridge their worlds. What we had was physical, nothing more, he lied, avoiding her penetrating gaze. Had. She stepped closer. Past tense already. We were together 3 days ago. Shame coursed through him. After promising himself he would end things with Astrid immediately following Melody's pregnancy announcement, he had failed at the first test. One call about a crisis with the Embarcadero project, and he'd found himself in her apartment, his resolve dissolving like sugar in rain. That was a mistake, he said firmly. It won't happen again. You've said that before. She moved closer, her perfume, something expensive and subtle, enveloping him. Yet here we are. This time is different. I'm going to be a father. And you think that changes who you are, what you want? Her laugh was soft but cutting. You're not built for domestic bliss, Trent. You need challenge, competition, conquest, things she can't give you. You don't know what she gives me. I know what she can't. Astrid's fingers traced the lapel of his suit. She can't match your ambition. She can't understand the world you've fought to dominate. She can't challenge you the way I do. When she kissed him, Trent didn't pull away immediately, a moment of weakness that undermined all his declarations of change. This stops now, he said, finally stepping back. I'm marrying Melody. We're having a child together. That's my decision. Astrid studied him with cold calculation. For now, but we both know you'll be back. She gathered her portfolio and headed for the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. One more thing. If you think you can simply erase me from your life, remember that I'm the architect on your most important project. I'll be in your world whether you like it or not. The implied threat hung in the air long after she left. What do you think about the plaza for the reception? Melody asked, flipping through a wedding magazine. They sat on the sofa in her apartment, her feet in his lap, her small baby bump just beginning to show beneath her t-shirt. Too traditional? The plaza is perfect, Trent replied, though he'd barely glanced at the page. Melody set down the magazine. You're a million miles away. Sorry, work stress. This had become his standard excuse, a shield behind which he concealed his ongoing struggle. Despite his promises to himself, he hadn't successfully broken things off with Astrid. Their encounters had become less frequent, but more intense, charged with the risk of discovery. Is it the Embarcadero project? Harper mentioned construction is behind schedule. Trent tensed. How would Harper know that? She's designing interiors for a building nearby. Contractors talk. Melody's expression grew concerned. Is something wrong with the project? Nothing I can't handle. He squeezed her foot reassuringly. Just the usual challenges of a development this size. What he couldn't tell her was that Astrid had become increasingly erratic, alternating between professional brilliance and emotional manipulation. She'd threatened twice to withdraw from the project entirely, a move that would cost millions and delay construction by months. Each time Trent had been forced to placate her, drawn back into their toxic dance. Well, I have something that might cheer you up. Melody reached for a small gift bag beside the sofa, an early wedding present. Inside was a silver pocket watch, elegantly simple with the engraving, "To the future. All my love, M." "It's beautiful," he said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you." "Open it," she urged. Inside the watch face was a tiny photograph of her latest sonogram, their child, barely the size of a lime but unmistakably human. The reality of what he was risking hit Trent with physical force. This wasn't just about Melody anymore, or even their relationship. This was about an innocent life that would bear the consequences of his choices. "I love you," he said, the words carrying the weight of a promise he desperately wanted to keep. As the summer progressed and wedding preparations accelerated, Trent found himself living in increasingly segregated realities. Mornings with Melody at prenatal appointments, marveling at the sound of their baby's heartbeat. Afternoons at construction sites, avoiding Astrid's knowing glances. Evenings at cake tastings and venue tours, playing the role of devoted fiancé, while messages from Astrid accumulated on his phone. The wedding was set for September, a small ceremony and reception for 200 guests at the Palace Hotel, the same place where they'd first met. At 4 months pregnant, Melody glowed with a serene beauty that drew attention wherever they went. Her warmth and genuine nature had won over even Trent's skeptical mother, who'd initially viewed the relationship as a phase her son would outgrow. Only Desmond Burnett remained coldly distant, treating the impending marriage as an unfortunate business complication rather than a family milestone. "Your father asked if we'd signed a prenup yet," Melody mentioned after a tense dinner at the Burnett mansion. "Is that something we need to discuss?" "Don't worry about my father," Trent replied, tightening his grip on the steering wheel. "He sees everything through the lens of asset protection. I don't mind signing something. I understand there's a lot at stake." Her reasonable reaction only increased his shame. Melody never demanded expensive gifts or leveraged their relationship for material gain. Unlike Astrid, who expertly wielded her connections to advance her career, Melody remained refreshingly unmotivated by status or wealth. "No prenup," he said firmly. "I'm all in, 100%. If only his actions matched his words. 2 weeks before the wedding, Astrid delivered her ultimatum. They stood in the empty penthouse of the nearly completed Embarcadero project, floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing the bay stretched out before them, sailboats dotting the water like white butterflies. "It's magnificent," Trent acknowledged, surveying the space that perfectly realized his vision. "The commission will be thrilled." "I didn't ask you here to discuss the commission." Astrid's voice was taut with controlled emotion. "This charade has gone on long enough." "What charade?" "This engagement. This pretense that you're going to live happily ever after with your pregnant schoolteacher, while still coming to my bed whenever the urge strikes." Trent's jaw tightened. "I've told you repeatedly. It's over between us. Yet here you are again." Her laugh held no humor. "You don't get to have both, Trent. Not anymore." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's time to choose. End this engagement and be with me openly, or I go to your fiancé with evidence of our affair." A cold dread settled in Trent's stomach. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't I?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos of them together, entering her apartment building, leaving a hotel intimately entwined in her bed. "How do you think Melody would feel seeing these? Or your investors, the ones who value your family man image for the Chen Group project?" The threat was clear and multifaceted, personal destruction and professional damage in one blow. "This is blackmail. This is clarity." Astrid's expression softened slightly. "I don't want to hurt you, Trent. I want you. All of you. Not just the scraps of time you can spare between playing house with her. You're asking me to abandon my child. I'm asking you to stop lying to yourself, to her, to me." She placed a hand on his chest. "We both know where this is heading. You'll marry her, try to be the devoted husband and father, grow increasingly restless and resentful. Eventually, you'll break her heart anyway, just later messier with more collateral damage. The worst part was that he could see the path she described with perfect clarity. It mirrored his father's pattern, decades of marriage to his mother, while maintaining a series of discreet affairs, creating an atmosphere of tension and unspoken betrayal that had poisoned their home. "I need time to think," he said finally. "You have until the rehearsal dinner. After that, I'm done waiting." She kissed him with cold precision. "Choose wisely." The rehearsal dinner was held at the Pacific Club, its panoramic views of the Golden Gate Bridge, providing a stunning backdrop for the intimate gathering of family and close friends. Melody looked radiant in a simple cream dress that accommodated her growing belly, her hair swept up in an elegant knot. Throughout the evening, Trent moved as if underwater, smiling at appropriate moments, accepting congratulations, all while Astrid's ultimatum echoed in his mind. His phone burned in his pocket, where her latest message waited. 24 hours. After the main course, Melody's friend Harper clinked her glass for attention. Before dessert, the bride-to-be has a special surprise for her almost husband. Melody stood somewhat self-consciously. "As most of you know, music has always been my greatest form of expression. So I wanted to give Trent something that spoke to what he's brought to my life and what we'll build together." At her signal, the doors opened, and 8 children from her school program entered. They arranged themselves in a semicircle, each holding a different instrument. "These amazing kids have been practicing for weeks," Melody explained. "This is for you, Trent." What followed was a simple but moving arrangement of What a Wonderful World, performed with the earnest concentration of young musicians. A dark-haired boy with serious eyes played the melody on a recorder, while others provided rhythm and harmony. Trent watched, transfixed, as Melody joined them for the final verse, her clear voice rising above the instruments. The sincerity of the performance, the trust in the children's faces as they followed her lead, the absolute openness of her expression as she sang to him, it all struck him with devastating clarity. This was real. This was true. This was a world built on genuine connection, not calculation or conquest, and he was about to destroy it. As applause filled the room, Trent felt his carefully constructed compartments collapsing. The weight of his duplicity crushed down on him, making it difficult to breathe. When Melody returned to his side, her eyes shining with love, he could barely meet her gaze. "That was beautiful," he managed, his voice thick. "I wanted you to see what you've helped create," she whispered. "Not just our baby, but possibilities for these kids too. Your support made this program possible." Her gratitude was unbearable. His phone vibrated again, another message from Astrid. As dinner concluded and guests mingled over coffee and dessert, Trent slipped away to the terrace, finally reading her text. "Tomorrow is the day of your choice, me or her. There is no third option." Alone under the stars, the San Francisco lights spread below him like a reflection of the night sky. Trent faced the truth he'd been evading for months. Regardless of what he decided, someone would be devastated, including, quite possibly, himself. Trent's penthouse suite offered panoramic views of San Francisco, but he noticed none of it as he paced the hardwood floors at 3 a.m. The rehearsal dinner had ended hours ago, with him begging off the traditional night before wedding separation, claiming last-minute work that couldn't wait. The real reason lay in his inability to face Melody while his mind churned with Astrid's ultimatum. He poured another scotch, his fourth, and moved to the window. Fog rolled across the bay, swallowing the lights of Oakland on the opposite shore. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. Visibility reduced to zero at the precise moment he needed to see his path clearly. His phone screen illuminated with Astrid's face. He let it ring through to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text. "Ignoring me won't make this go away, tick-tock." Trent threw the phone onto the couch and pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window. The rational, calculating part of his brain, the part his father had cultivated and Burnett Pacific had rewarded, laid out the options with brutal clarity. Option 1, marry Melody, face Astrid's revenge, watch his personal reputation and business credibility implode when she released the evidence of their affair. Risk losing the Chen Group investment that represented years of work. Break Melody's heart anyway, just more publicly and destructively. Option 2, leave Melody. Deal with the immediate fallout of an abandoned wedding. Endure temporary social ostracism, but preserve his professional standing. Be with Astrid openly, someone who understood his world and ambitions. Provide financial support for his child while maintaining distance. Exactly as his own father had done with several half-siblings, Trent had only discovered in adulthood. He finished his drink, the alcohol doing nothing to dull the sharp edges of his decision. The irony wasn't lost on him. He prided himself on making tough choices, on seeing the end game while others got lost in sentiment. Yet here he was, paralyzed between his heart and his calculating mind. Dawn broke over the city as Trent finally collapsed into a restless sleep on the couch, his choice still unmade. Morning at the St. Regis Hotel found Melody in a flurry of joyous activity. The presidential suite buzzed with energy as her mother arranged white roses in her hair while Harper supervised the makeup artist. "Something's missing," Harper declared, stepping back to assess the overall effect. She rummaged through her bag and produced a small blue box. "Something borrowed. They were my grandmother's." Inside lay a pair of delicate pearl earrings. Melody gasped. "Harper, they're beautiful. Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure. You're practically family anyway." Harper helped her fasten them, then stood back with a critical eye. "Perfect. Trent's going to pass out when he sees you." Melody laughed, but her hand instinctively went to her rounded belly beneath the custom-designed gown. "Let's hope not. I need him conscious to say I do." Her mother, Elaine, quieter and more observant than the effervescent Harper, approached with a glass of sparkling water. "How are you feeling, sweetie? Any nausea this morning?" "None. Baby Burnett is being very cooperative today." Melody sipped the water, taking a moment to absorb the reality that in a few hours she would be Mrs. Trent Burnett, mother to his child, part of his world in a permanent, binding way. A brief shadow of doubt crossed her mind, the same one that occasionally surfaced during quiet moments. Was she truly ready for this? Not just marriage and motherhood, but entry into Trent's high-powered, high-pressure universe. Would she be able to maintain her own identity, her work with the children, her values? "Second thoughts?" her mother asked softly, reading her expression with practiced ease. "Not about Trent," Melody clarified. "Just wondering if I'll fit into his life the way he fits into mine." Elaine took her daughter's hands. "Marriage isn't about fitting perfectly into someone else's life. It's about creating a new life together that has room for both of you." The wisdom of this settled Melody's nerves. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Trent would face them together. He'd proven his commitment despite his father's disapproval, despite the raised eyebrows of his social circle at her modest background. He'd chosen her, chosen them, and that was what mattered. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. The wedding coordinator peeked in. 30 minutes, ladies. The first guests are arriving." Harper clapped her hands. "Showtime. Let's get this bride into position." Across town, Trent stood in his own suite, methodically knotting his tie as his best friend and business partner, Marcus, lounged on the sofa. "You look like you're preparing for a firing squad, not a wedding," Marcus observed, checking his watch. "We need to leave in 20 minutes to beat traffic." Trent made no response, his movements mechanical as he secured his cufflinks. "Cold feet?" Marcus asked, more seriously now. "Because if you're having doubts, better to speak up now than—" "I'm fine," Trent cut him off. "Just focused." His phone chimed with a text. "Astrid, made your decision yet?" "Time's running out." Marcus raised an eyebrow at Trent's sudden tension. "Everything okay?" "Fine. Work issue." Trent slipped the phone into his pocket without responding. He'd been avoiding Astrid's increasingly frantic messages since waking, still unable to commit to either path. The situation had a terrible logic to it, like a business deal gone wrong with no clean exit strategy. Staying with Melody meant professional suicide. Leaving meant personal failure. Either way, he lost something irreplaceable. "I need some air," he announced abruptly. "I'll meet you at the church." "What?" "No way." Marcus stood, blocking his path. "We're going together." "That's what best men do." "I just need 15 minutes. I'll take a cab and meet you there." Marcus studied him with mounting concern. "Trent, what's going on? You've been off for weeks. If there's something you need to talk about—" "There isn't." Trent's tone left no room for discussion. 15 minutes, I promise." Reluctantly, Marcus stepped aside. "Don't be late. Melody deserves better than that." The words hit Trent like a physical blow. Better than that. Better than him, certainly. The realization clarified something he'd been avoiding. Regardless of his choice today, Melody would eventually discover the man he truly was. Perhaps it was kinder to break her heart now, cleanly, than to subject her to years of discovering his inadequacies piece by piece. As Marcus left to handle last-minute details, Trent pulled out his phone and finally responded to Astrid. "Where are you?" Her reply came instantly. "The marina. Slip 42. Come now." He stared at the message for a long moment before making his final decision. With meticulous precision, he removed a pen from his desk and wrote a brief note on hotel stationery. No explanations, no excuses. Just the bare minimum. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." The cathedral grace stood resplendent, bathed in late morning sunlight. White lilies and champagne-colored roses adorned every surface, their scent mingling with the ancient smell of wood and incense. 200 guests filled the pews, the soft murmur of conversation occasionally punctuated by laughter. In the bride's waiting room, Melody took deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. The photographer captured final moments, her mother adjusting the veil, Harper straightening the train, the maid of honor passing her the bouquet of white peonies and eucalyptus. "Has anyone heard from Trent?" she asked, a flutter of anxiety disrupting her calm. "Is he here?" Marcus texted that they're running slightly behind, Harper reassured her. "Traffic, nothing to worry about." Melody nodded, willing herself to remain calm. Pregnancy had heightened her emotions, leaving her more vulnerable to anxiety. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby shift. "It's okay," she whispered, as much to herself as to her unborn child. "Everything's perfect." In the groom's waiting area, Marcus checked his watch for the 20th time. Trent was now 30 minutes late with no response to calls or texts. The wedding coordinator hovered nearby, her professional smile growing strained. "Perhaps we should delay the start by 15 minutes, she suggested. "These things happen. Groom nerves." Marcus nodded gratefully, though a cold dread had begun to pool in his stomach. This wasn't like Trent, who operated with military precision in all aspects of his life. Something was wrong. As the 15-minute delay stretched to 20, then 30, the mood in the church shifted from anticipation to concern. The priest approached Marcus with a worried expression. "Should I make an announcement?" Before Marcus could respond, the church doors opened and a disheveled hotel bellman rushed in, scanning the crowd before spotting Marcus. He hurried forward, an envelope clutched in his hand. "Are you Marcus Whitfield, the best man?" At Marcus's nod, he continued, "This was left at the front desk for immediate delivery to the bride, but I thought perhaps you should see it first." Marcus took the envelope, his sense of dread deepening when he recognized Trent's distinctive handwriting. Stepping away from the curious onlookers, he opened it and read the 7 devastating words. "Son of a bitch," he whispered, shock giving way to anger. How could Trent do this? To Melody, to their unborn child, to everyone who had believed in him. The wedding coordinator appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Whitfield, the guests are getting restless. Should we continue to wait or—" "He's not coming," Marcus said, the words bitter in his mouth. "He's not fucking coming." 40 minutes earlier, Trent had stood at the marina, watching Astrid's sleek silhouette emerge from her car. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the fog, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. "You're cutting it close," she observed, glancing at her watch. "The ceremony starts in less than an hour." "There won't be a ceremony." Trent's voice sounded distant to his own ears, as if someone else were speaking. Triumph flashed across Astrid's face, quickly masked by an expression of concerned sympathy. "You made the right choice. She would have made you miserable eventually. Don't." He held up a hand. "Don't pretend this is about my happiness." "Isn't it?" She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes sharp with intelligence and ambition that matched his own. "We're the same, you and I. We understand each other. That's worth something." Was it? Standing at this precipice, having just severed the most genuine connection he'd ever formed, Trent wasn't certain. But the die was cast. The note had been delivered. There was no going back. "Let's go," he said, nodding toward her car. "I need to get out of the city. My family has a place in Mendocino. We can stay there until things calm down." She slipped her arm through his, a proprietary gesture. "You'll see, Trent. In a month, this will all feel like a close call, a bullet dodged." As they drove across the Golden Gate Bridge, Trent stared out at the endless Pacific. He'd always prided himself on facing the consequences of his decisions directly. Today, for the first time, he was running away. Back at the cathedral, chaos erupted when Marcus finally delivered the news to Melody. Her initial disbelief, there must be some mistake, he wouldn't do this, gave way to stunned silence as she read Trent's note. "He can't even give me a real explanation," she whispered, the paper trembling in her hand. "Just, I can't do this?" Harper moved to embrace her, but Melody suddenly gasped, doubling over as a sharp pain knifed through her abdomen. "Something's wrong," she managed, her face draining of color. The baby... Within moments, the wedding transformed into a medical emergency. Elaine and Harper supported Melody as she was helped outside to a waiting car, her wedding dress billowing around her like a deflated dream. Someone called ahead to the hospital, while guests stood in shocked clusters, piecing together what had happened. In the back seat of Harper's SUV, Melody curled around her belly, each contraction more intense than the last. "This can't be happening," she repeated, tears streaming down her face. "Not the baby too. Please, not the baby too." At San Francisco General, emergency room staff rushed to meet them. The words "pregnant bride" and "abandoned at the altar" spread through the medical team in hushed whispers. A young doctor with kind eyes took charge, moving Melody into an exam room while explaining in calm tones that stress could trigger contractions, but they would do everything possible to stop premature labor. 6 months, Melody kept saying, as if the number itself were a talisman. "I'm only 6 months along, it's too early." Monitors were attached, IVs inserted, medication administered. In the hallway, Harper paced while Elaine sat still as stone, her face betraying nothing of the fury and heartbreak she felt on her daughter's behalf. "Someone should call Trent," a nurse suggested. "No." Harper's response was immediate and fierce. "He doesn't deserve to know." But moments later, her phone rang, Marcus asking about Melody's condition. "Is she okay? The baby?" "We don't know yet," Harper replied, her voice breaking. "They're trying to stop the contractions." "Where is he, Marcus? How could he do this?" "I don't know. He's not answering calls or texts. I went to his apartment, the office, everywhere." Marcus sounded as devastated as she felt. "I never thought he'd..." "Christ, Harper, I had no idea." "Someone knows where he is," Harper insisted. "Someone must have seen him." There was a pause before Marcus responded. "The valet at the hotel mentioned seeing him leave with a blonde woman, tall, expensive looking. Does that mean anything to you?" Harper's blood ran cold. The project architect, the one Melody had mentioned in passing, laughing about how she'd tried to flirt with Trent during meetings. "I think I know exactly who that is." The contractions finally subsided near midnight. Melody lay exhausted in the hospital bed, monitors beeping a reassuring rhythm that confirmed her baby's stable condition. The doctors had administered medication to stop premature labor and recommended complete bed rest for at least a week. Physically, she and the baby would recover. Emotionally, she remained in shock, suspended between denial and a pain so vast she couldn't begin to process it. "You should try to sleep," her mother urged, smoothing back her hair. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will all be a nightmare," Melody whispered. "That I'll be back at the St. Regis putting on my dress waiting for Trent." Elaine's expression tightened. "I know, sweetheart, but you need to rest now for the baby's sake." "Did he call? Has anyone heard from him?" Her mother exchanged a glance with Harper, who sat in the corner of the room furiously texting. "No, honey, not yet." The evasive answer penetrated Melody's fog of shock. "What aren't you telling me?" After another silent exchange with Elaine, Harper approached the bed. "Marcus thinks there might be someone else involved, the architect on Trent's project." "Astrid?" Melody's voice sounded strange to her own ears. "No, that's not possible. He wouldn't..." "The valet saw them leave together," Harper said gently, around the time the ceremony was supposed to start. The revelation hit like a physical blow, driving the air from Melody's lungs. All those late meetings, business trips, phone calls that required privacy, a pattern she'd attributed to Trent's demanding career, suddenly rearranged itself into something far more sinister. "How long?" she managed, her hands unconsciously shielding her belly. "We don't know for sure that..." "How long?" Harper hesitated. "Marcus thinks it might have been going on for months, since the Embarcadero project started." 6 months? The entire duration of their engagement? While she'd been planning their wedding, choosing flowers, dreaming of their future, he'd been with someone else. The betrayal was so complete, so multi-layered, that Melody couldn't even begin to absorb its magnitude. "I need to be alone," she whispered. "Please." Once her mother and Harper had reluctantly stepped out, Melody finally allowed herself to break. The sobs came from the deepest part of her, animal sounds of pain that seemed to have no end. She cried for the future that had evaporated in an instant, for her public humiliation, for her child who would be born into this shattered reality. Most of all, she cried for her own blindness, for believing so completely in someone who had been living a lie. The news broke the next morning. "Real estate heir abandons pregnant bride," screamed the tabloid headline. Society columns were more delicately phrased, but equally damning. "Burnett Hartwell nuptials end in shocking no-show." By afternoon, the story had evolved to include rumors of another woman and ongoing affair, with grainy photos of Trent and Astrid entering her apartment building on multiple occasions over the past months. In Mendocino, 3 hours north of the media frenzy, Trent sat on the deck of Astrid's family beach house, staring at the relentless Pacific. His phone lay on the table beside him, powered off since yesterday. He couldn't face the barrage of messages he knew awaited him, from Marcus, from business associates, possibly even from Melody herself. The thought of her twisted in his gut like a knife. Had she received his note? Was she all right? What about the baby? "You're brooding again," Astrid observed, emerging from the house with 2 glasses of wine. She wore one of his shirts and nothing else, her long legs golden in the afternoon sun. "It doesn't suit you." "I need to check on her," Trent said, reaching for his phone. "Make sure she's okay." Astrid's hand closed over his, preventing him from turning the device on. "That would be cruel, Trent. You made your choice. Contacting her now only prolongs the pain. She's carrying my child. I have responsibilities, and you'll fulfill them. Financial support, legal recognition, whatever's necessary." Her voice took on a harder edge. "But there's nothing to be gained by emotional entanglement. Clean breaks heal faster." Did they? Trent wasn't so sure. The ragged hole in his chest where his connection to Melody had been felt anything but clean. He'd severed something vital within himself, something he wasn't certain could be repaired. "I need to know if they're all right," he insisted. Astrid sighed. "Fine, but not directly. Call Marcus if you must. Just remember that every contact keeps the wound fresh, for her and for you." When Trent finally powered on his phone, it exploded with notifications. Dozens of missed calls, texts, voicemails. The most recent from Marcus: "She's in the hospital. Contractions. Call me, you fucking coward." Hospital. The word sent ice through his veins. Had his actions endangered the baby? The thought was unbearable. Before he could dial, another message arrived, not from Marcus, but from his father. The brevity of the text belied its devastating content. "Your presence requested at Burnett Pacific, Monday 9th a.m. Board meeting regarding continued leadership in light of recent events." The professional consequences he'd anticipated were materializing even faster than expected. The Chen Group investors were conservative, family-oriented. A scandal involving an abandoned pregnant bride would not sit well with them. His father would be looking for ways to minimize damage to the company, even if it meant sacrificing his own son. "Bad news?" Astrid asked, noting his expression. "My father's calling a board meeting. They're going to try to push me out." She shrugged, unconcerned. "Let them try. You're a major shareholder. They can't remove you completely. They can strip me of operational control, make me a figurehead. Then we'll start our own firm." Her confidence was absolute. "With your connections and my design expertise, we dominate within 5 years." Her words should have reassured him. This was exactly what he'd chosen, a partner who understood the business, who thought strategically, who could turn setbacks into opportunities. Yet as he stared at Marcus's message, "Call me, you fucking coward," Trent felt a creeping certainty that he'd made a catastrophic error, not just morally or emotionally, but practically. He'd calculated that leaving Melody before the wedding would contain the damage, preserve his professional standing, allow him to control the narrative. Instead, he'd created a public relations nightmare that threatened everything he'd built. Worse, he'd hurt the one person who had loved him for himself rather than what he could provide or achieve. As the sun set over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the deck, Trent finally acknowledged the truth. In trying to protect himself from vulnerability, he'd destroyed something irreplaceable. And for what? The freedom to be with someone who saw him as a strategic asset rather than a human being. Beside him, Astrid scrolled through her phone, already making plans for their future. completely untroubled by the wreckage they'd left behind. Her detachment, so similar to his own usual approach, suddenly seemed alien and disturbing. "I need to go back," he said abruptly. "Deal with this directly." Astrid looked up, her expression sharpening. "That would be a mistake. Let it blow over first." "It's not blowing over. Melody's in the hospital, the board is meeting. I can't hide here while everything falls apart." "You're not thinking clearly. This emotional reaction is exactly why you wanted me to choose you," he interrupted, a dawning realization spreading through him. "Because you thought I'd be easy to control once I'd burned my bridges." Her silence confirmed his suspicion. This had never been about love or even desire, at least not primarily. It had been about acquisition, about owning someone else's power and using it for her own advancement, just as he had done countless times in business. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd abandoned a woman who genuinely loved him for someone who saw him as he saw others, as a means to an end, the perfect cosmic punishment for a lifetime of calculated decisions. "I'm going back to San Francisco tomorrow," he stated, his decision final. "You can come or stay, your choice." Astrid's laugh held no warmth. "Oh, I'm coming. We made a deal, Trent. I held up my end, kept quiet about our affair until you made your choice. Now you'll hold up yours." Her smile was predatory. "Unless you want those photos I mentioned to find their way to the board before your meeting." And there it was, the trap he'd walked into with eyes wide open. He'd chosen Astrid over Melody to avoid scandal and professional damage, only to find himself at the mercy of someone who had no qualms about using his vulnerability against him. As night fell over the coast, Trent faced the consequences of his choice with growing clarity. He'd sacrificed genuine love for an alliance that was already revealing itself as toxic and manipulative. He'd abandoned a woman who'd offered him redemption for one who reinforced his worst tendencies. And somewhere in San Francisco, Melody lay in a hospital bed, fighting to protect their child while processing the ultimate betrayal, alone because of his cowardice, suffering because of his selfishness. No matter what came next, Trent knew with absolute certainty he would never forgive himself for this, nor, he suspected, would anyone else. The days following Melody's hospitalization blurred together in a haze of medical monitoring and emotional numbness. The doctors kept her under observation for a week, concerned about her elevated blood pressure and the persistent risk of premature labor. Through it all, she moved as if underwater, responding to questions mechanically, following instructions without protest, her mind unable to fully process the collapse of her world. "Your vitals are stabilizing," Dr. Sharma noted during morning rounds 3 days after the non-wedding. "But I'm concerned about your emotional state. Have you been sleeping?" Melody shook her head. Sleep meant dreams of Trent, of white dresses and promises. Sleep meant waking to the fresh shock of abandonment each morning. "I'll prescribe something mild that won't affect the baby," Dr. Sharma said gently. "But medication is only a temporary solution. I'd like you to speak with our perinatal counselor." "I don't need therapy," Melody insisted. "I need to get out of here and figure out what happens next." "What happens next is you protect that baby," came a firm voice from the doorway. Elaine Hartwell entered carrying a small duffel bag. At 58, she maintained the straight-backed posture of someone who had weathered life's storms without breaking. "I've brought your things. The doctor says you can go home tomorrow if you promise complete bed rest." Melody's expression crumpled. "I can't go back to my apartment. Everything there reminds me of him." "You're not going there," Elaine said matter-of-factly. "I've found us a short-term rental in Pacific Heights, 2 bedrooms, quiet neighborhood, no memories." "You're staying in San Francisco? What about your students back home?" Elaine taught high school English in Portland. "I've taken a leave of absence for the rest of the semester." Her mother's tone brooked no argument. "You need support, and that baby needs stability. End of discussion." The quiet efficiency with which Elaine had rearranged her life to support her daughter brought tears to Melody's eyes, the first genuine emotion she'd felt since the hospital admission. "Thank you," she whispered. Elaine squeezed her hand. "You do the same for me. That's what family means. We show up." The unspoken contrast with Trent's desertion hung in the air between them. "The board's decision is final," Desmond Burnett announced, his voice devoid of paternal sentiment. The Burnett Pacific conference room had emptied after a brutal 3-hour meeting, leaving only father and son. "You'll remain on the executive committee, but operational control of the Embarcadero project transfers to Richardson effective immediately. Trent maintained his professional mask, despite the humiliation burning through him. The Chen Group agreed to invest because of my vision. This will jeopardize. The Chen Group is threatening to pull out entirely because of your vision, Desmond cut in, or more accurately, because of your appalling personal judgment. Apparently, traditional Chinese investors take a dim view of men who abandon pregnant brides. Trent flinched at the blunt characterization. The situation is more complicated than— I don't care about complications, his father interrupted. I care about results. And the result of your actions is that our stock dropped 8% since Monday. The financial press is having a field day with the moral character of Burnett leadership. The older man leaned forward, his expression glacial. Consider yourself lucky. The board wanted you removed completely. I convinced them your institutional knowledge was too valuable to lose. How generous, Trent replied, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. Generous? Desmond stood, his imposing height amplified by decades of wielding power. You humiliated this family, made us tabloid fodder. And for what? Some architect with good cheekbones? He shook his head in disgust. At least when I had affairs, I was discreet. I never embarrassed your mother publicly. The comparison to his father's infidelities hit like a slap. All his life, Trent had witnessed the cold formality between his parents, had seen his mother retreat into charity work and social functions while his father pursued other women with calculated secrecy. He'd promised himself he'd never replicate that pattern, yet here he was, having caused far more damage with far less sophistication. What about Melody? He asked. The baby? That's being handled by legal. Desmond straightened his tie, preparing to depart. They'll draw up a generous support agreement. I suggest you sign whatever they put in front of you without argument. It's the least you can do after. He gestured vaguely, as if the abandonment were too distasteful to name. I need to see her, Trent insisted. Explain. Explain what? That you're sorry you chose your mistress over her? That you regret embarrassing her in front of everyone she knows? His father's laugh was hard and short. Some things can't be explained away, son. This is one of them. As Desmond reached the door, he paused. The architect. Is she worth all this? Trent thought of Astrid's calculating eyes, her thinly veiled threats when he'd suggested ending their relationship during the drive back from Mendocino. No? Then you're an even bigger fool than I thought. The door closed with quiet finality, leaving Trent alone with the wreckage of his professional reputation and the growing certainty that he'd made the worst mistake of his life. Melody sat at the baby grand piano in the rented house's sunlit living room, her fingers ghosting over the keys without pressing them. At 28 weeks pregnant, her body felt simultaneously foreign and intimately connected to the life growing inside her. The baby, a girl according to the latest ultrasound, moved constantly now, as if trying to remind Melody she wasn't truly alone. You don't have to just stare at it, Elaine said, entering with 2 mugs of herbal tea. The doctor said you could resume light activities. Playing would probably help. I haven't touched a piano since. Melody trailed off. Since the rehearsal dinner. Since the children played for Trent. Since the last time she believed in fairy tales. All the more reason to start again. Elaine set the tea on a side table and pulled up a chair. Remember after Dad left, how you wouldn't speak but would play for hours? Melody nodded. Those first months after her parents' divorce remained a blur of silent pain, broken only by the music she'd poured into her mother's upright piano. Notes had replaced words. Melodies expressed what her 9-year-old heart couldn't articulate. Tentatively, she pressed a key. A single clear G rang through the room, then another. Another. Her fingers remembered what her mind wanted to forget, how to translate emotion into sound. Without consciously choosing, she began playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, its gentle melancholy matching her mood. As the familiar patterns flowed through her hands, something tight in her chest began to loosen. Tears formed, but didn't fall. For the first time since the hospital, she felt fully present in her body, in the moment. When the final notes faded, Elaine spoke softly. You always come back to yourself through music. It's the only thing that makes sense right now, Melody admitted. Everything else feels like it's happening to someone else. That's the shock talking, it will pass. What if I don't want it to pass? Melody turned on the bench to face her mother. What if I'd rather stay numb than feel what's waiting on the other side? Elaine reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear, a gesture from childhood that suddenly made Melody feel both young and ancient. "The only way out is through, sweetheart. You know that better than most. It's what you teach your kids every day. This is different. Is it? You help children process trauma through music because you know healing doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from transforming it into something else." Elaine's voice remained gentle but firm. "The same applies to you, even if it feels impossible right now." Melody placed her hands protectively over her belly. "I have to be strong for her." "Yes. And that means dealing with what happened, not pretending it didn't." Elaine handed her the cooling tea. "Start with the music, the rest will follow." That night, for the first time since the abandonment, Melody slept without medication. In her dreams, she played a piano, while a small girl with curious eyes watched, learning, waiting to join in. "You need to stop calling her," Astrid said coldly, watching Trent end another attempt to reach Melody. 2 weeks had passed since their return from Mendocino, and the pattern had become familiar. Trent trying various numbers associated with Melody, all calls going unanswered or blocked. "She's carrying my child, and she clearly doesn't want to speak to you." Hardly surprising. Astrid examined her manicure with studied indifference. "You're only making things worse by persisting." They stood in Trent's penthouse kitchen, a space designed for entertaining rather than intimacy. Despite Astrid practically moving in after their return from Mendocino, the apartment maintained the sterile perfection of a model home. No personal photographs, no evidence of shared life, nothing to suggest genuine connection. "I need to explain," Trent insisted. "Explain what? That you chose me? That you realized she wouldn't fit into your world?" Astrid approached, sliding her arms around his waist. "You made the right decision, Trent. The painful part is over." Was it? The hollow feeling in his chest suggested otherwise. Each day since leaving Melody felt like operating on autopilot, going through motions without purpose or pleasure. Even his work, always his refuge, had lost its savor since the board's decision to reduce his authority. "I've lost operational control of the Embarcadero project," he said, stepping away from Astrid's embrace. "They're bringing in Richardson to take over." Her expression hardened. "That affects my contract." "I know. I tried to explain that your design concept requires my oversight to be properly executed, but this is unacceptable," she interrupted. "I agreed to this project because of your vision. Richardson is a corporate drone with no aesthetic sense." The speed with which she shifted from feigned sympathy to professional outrage confirmed what Trent had increasingly suspected. Their relationship had always been transactional. His professional setback had instantly reduced his value in her calculation. "I'm trying to fix it," he said wearily, "but my position is complicated right now. Fix it faster." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "I didn't sacrifice my reputation to be associated with a failed project." "Sacrificed your reputation?" The words escaped before he could contain them. "I'm the one who left a pregnant woman at the altar. I'm the one being crucified in the press." "For a choice you made," she reminded him coldly. "No one forced you to leave her." But hadn't they? The ultimatum, the threats to expose their affair, the calculated timing, all had been designed to pressure him into a corner. "I need some air," Trent said, grabbing his keys. "I'll be back later." Astrid crossed her arms. "Where are you going?" "For a drive. To think." "About her?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "This pathetic guilt is becoming tiresome," Astrid called as he headed for the door. "You need to decide what you want, Trent, because my patience isn't infinite." Neither, he was beginning to realize, was his tolerance for manipulation. By her 30th week of pregnancy, Melody had established a new routine. Mornings for prenatal appointments and practical preparations, nursery furniture, pediatrician interviews, birth plan discussions. Afternoons for music, both her own playing and tentative steps toward adapting her therapy program for remote teaching. Evenings for quiet reflection, often spent walking slowly around the Pacific Heights neighborhood with her mother, discussing names for the baby and plans for the future. "I've been thinking about Seattle," she mentioned during one such walk. The June evening was unusually warm, the setting sun painting the distant Golden Gate Bridge in fiery gold. "The University of Washington has a strong music therapy research program. They might have teaching positions." Shalane considered this. "You're thinking of leaving San Francisco permanently?" "I can't stay here," Melody admitted. "Too many memories, too much public attention." The society pages had finally moved on to fresher scandals, but Melody still occasionally caught people staring, whispering behind hands when they recognized her in public. The abandoned bride, the cautionary tale. Seattle could be good, Elaine agreed. Close enough to Portland that I could visit easily. You'd support me moving so far from my life here? I support you rebuilding your life however you need to. Elaine took her daughter's arm as they navigated a steep hill. Besides, your real life isn't a place. It's what you do, who you love, how you contribute. You can take all that with you anywhere. Melody smiled, a genuine expression that came more frequently now. When did you get so wise? Around the time you were born. Nothing like parenthood to clarify what matters. Elaine's expression softened. You'll see for yourself soon enough. The mention of parenthood brought Melody's hand automatically to her rounded belly. The baby shifted beneath her palm, a reassuring movement that had become her touchstone when anxiety threatened. I'm still terrified, she confessed, not just of labor and delivery, but of doing this alone, of being enough for her. You won't be alone, Elaine reminded her. And as for being enough, that fear doesn't go away even with a partner. Every parent wonders if they're enough. Did you? Even before Dad left? Especially then. Elaine's smile held a trace of old sadness. I knew our marriage was failing long before the divorce. Spent years wondering if my professional choices were unfair to you, if staying with your father despite our problems was better or worse for your development. This was new information. In Melody's childhood memories, the divorce had arrived like a sudden storm, unexpected and devastating. You never told me that. You were 9. You needed security, not your mother's existential doubts. Elaine squeezed her arm gently. The point is, I made plenty of mistakes, but I loved you fiercely and did my best with what I knew. That's all any parent can do. What if my best isn't good enough? What if she grows up feeling abandoned because her father chose to leave before she was even born? Then you'll help her process those feelings, just like you help your students process their traumas. Elaine's confidence was absolute. You have skills most parents don't, Melody, and experience with exactly the kind of pain she might face. They paused at the crest of the hill, looking out over the city spread below them. Somewhere out there was Trent, living his life with the woman he'd chosen over his unborn child. The thought still had the power to wound, but the pain had transformed from acute agony to a duller ache, present, but no longer paralyzing. I'm going to be okay, Melody said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. We're going to be okay. Yes, her mother agreed. You will. Trent stared at the legal document on his desk, the language cold and precise. Go agreement for parental rights and financial support. Burnett Pacific's attorneys had drafted it within days of the abandoned wedding, but he'd resisted signing, hoping for direct communication with Melody first. After 6 weeks of unanswered calls and rejected messages, he'd finally accepted reality. This sterile legal arrangement was the only connection he would have to his child. The terms were straightforward: substantial financial support, medical insurance, educational trust fund. In exchange, Melody would not challenge his limited involvement, annual updates on the child's development, but no visitation rights unless she decided otherwise in the future. It was, objectively, a generous arrangement for a man who had abandoned his responsibilities so publicly. Yet as Trent scanned the clinical language defining his relationship to his unborn child, he felt only emptiness. His phone buzzed with a text from Astrid. Meeting with Richardson in 30. Be prepared to fight for my design concept. The message exemplified how their relationship had evolved in recent weeks. Professional demands, tactical alliances, strategic sex. None of the emotional connection, however complicated, that had characterized his time with Melody. As Trent prepared for yet another contentious meeting to salvage what remained of his project, a pattern became clear. Everything in his life was diminishing. His professional authority, his personal satisfaction, his self-respect. Each day brought new evidence that he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. The Embarcadero project, once his crowning achievement, had become a battleground between Richardson's conventional vision and Astrid's increasingly impractical demands. The Chen Group had reduced their investment by 30%. His father had taken to excluding him from key strategy meetings. Even Astrid's interest seemed contingent on his usefulness. Their conversations revolved exclusively around professional advancement and social positioning. When he attempted to discuss deeper concerns, regrets about Melody, anxiety about his unborn child, she dismissed these as weakness. "You're becoming tedious," she'd said recently, after he mentioned wanting to establish a trust for the baby beyond what the legal agreement required. "This maudlin guilt serves no purpose. What's done is done." Signing the parental rights agreement with a leaden sense of finality, Trent acknowledged the truth he'd been avoiding. In choosing Astrid over Melody, he hadn't just abandoned his fiancée and child. He'd abandoned the better version of himself that had begun to emerge during their relationship. With Melody, he'd glimpsed a life guided by genuine connection rather than strategic advantage. She'd seen past his carefully constructed facade to the uncertain, seeking person beneath. Had even loved that person, flaws and all. Now he was left with exactly what he'd always claimed to want, a partner who matched his ambition, who understood power dynamics, who never demanded emotional vulnerability, and it felt hollow to the core. The irony wasn't lost on him. In ruthlessly pursuing what he thought he wanted, he'd lost what he actually needed. "It's perfect," Harper declared, surveying the completed nursery in Melody's Seattle apartment. The room was bathed in soft afternoon light, walls painted a gentle mint green, with a mural of silver birch trees Harper had created herself. A white crib stood beneath a mobile of delicate origami birds, while a comfortable rocking chair occupied the corner by the window. At 36 weeks pregnant, Melody moved with the careful deliberation of someone carrying precious cargo. The cross-country move had been exhausting but necessary, a clean break from San Francisco and all its painful associations. "You've outdone yourself," she told Harper, admiring the detail work on the mural. "It's exactly what I imagined. Only the best for my goddaughter." Harper fluffed the cushions on the rocking chair. "Have you settled on a name yet?" "Lily," Melody said, running her hand along the crib rail. "Lily Elaine Hartwell." Harper nodded approvingly. "No Burnett, then?" "No." Melody's tone was firm. "She'll have my name." He forfeited the right to see his name on her birth certificate when he signed away his parental rights. The legal agreement had arrived via her attorney 3 weeks earlier. Melody had signed without emotion, the final severance of a connection that had once seemed so promising. "The university position is confirmed?" Harper asked, changing the subject. "Yes. Assistant professor of music therapy, starting in January after my maternity leave." Melody lowered herself carefully into the rocking chair. The department chair was incredibly accommodating about the timing. "Because they know they're lucky to get you." Harper began unpacking tiny clothes into the dresser. "Your program results speak for themselves. Those kids in San Francisco made remarkable progress." "I'll miss them," Melody admitted. "But I can't go back there." "I know." Harper squeezed her shoulder sympathetically. "Seattle is going to be great for both of you. New city, new job, new people who know nothing about how I was left at the altar while 6 months pregnant?" Melody finished with a small, sad smile. "It's okay. We can talk about it. I'm not fragile anymore." And she wasn't. The past 3 months had forced a profound transformation. Initial shock had given way to devastating pain, then gradually to a different kind of strength. Not the brittle armor of someone avoiding hurt, but the supple resilience of someone who had faced her worst fear and survived. "I'm proud of you," Harper said simply. "Most people would still be curled in a ball after what happened. I considered that option. Extensively." Melody's hand rested on her belly, feeling Lily's movements. "But then I realized something important. His choices don't define me. Never did, never will. Damn straight. I loved him," Melody continued, needing to articulate the understanding she'd reached. "The person I thought he was. Maybe even the person he could have been. But that man doesn't exist. Or if he does, he's buried too deep under layers of ambition and fear to matter." Harper sat on the ottoman facing her friend. "Do you ever wonder what he's doing now? If he regrets it?" "Sometimes," Melody admitted. "But it doesn't matter anymore. His regret can't undo what happened, can't erase the fact that he chose someone else over his own child." Rising carefully from the rocking chair, Melody moved to the window. Seattle spread before her, Elliott Bay shimmering under the late summer sun, the Space Needle standing like an exclamation point against the sky. A new city, a new beginning. "I'm going to build something good here," she said softly. "For myself and for Lily. Something that has nothing to do with Trent Burnett or what he did to us. I know you will, Harper replied, coming to stand beside her. You already are. As afternoon faded into evening, Melody felt an unfamiliar sensation settle within her. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but its precursor. Hope. The certainty that while her life hadn't gone as planned, it wasn't over. That she and her daughter would write their own story, independent of the man who had walked away. Miles away in San Francisco, Trent stood alone on his penthouse balcony, a tumbler of scotch untouched in his hand. The city lights blurred below him, beautiful and distant as stars. Inside, the remnants of another argument with Astrid lingered in the air. Harsh words about the Embarcadero project's latest setback, about his continued professional decline, about his inability to move forward from the mistakes of the past. She had stormed out an hour ago, threatening to end both their personal and professional relationships. The threat should have concerned him. Instead, he felt only weary relief at the temporary silence. His phone chimed with an email notification. Expecting more bad news about the project, he almost ignored it. When he finally checked, the subject line stopped him cold. Birth announcement. Lily Elaine Hartwell. The message was from Marcus, who had maintained minimal contact despite his obvious disappointment in Trent's choices. The text was brief. Thought you should know. Born yesterday in Seattle. 7 LBS, 2 Oz. Mother and baby doing well. Seattle. She had moved across the country, started a new life without a backward glance. Trent felt a complex surge of emotions, relief that the birth had gone well, grief at the distance, shame at his absence. Attached was a single photo, not of the baby's face, which Marcus had likely considered too intimate to share without permission, but of a tiny hand curled around what must have been Melody's finger. Perfect miniature nails, delicate creases on impossibly small knuckles. His daughter, a person who existed in the world now, who would grow and learn and become without him. The realization hit with physical force. He had lost something irreplaceable, not just Melody, whose absence had become a constant ache, but the chance to know this child, to see her first steps, hear her first words, watch her personality emerge. All sacrificed for what? Professional advancement that had evaporated anyway? A relationship built on mutual exploitation rather than genuine connection? As San Francisco's fog rolled in, enveloping the balcony in cool moisture, Trent faced the full consequences of his choice with unprecedented clarity. He had gambled everything that truly mattered on a calculation that had proven devastatingly wrong. Melody had rebuilt her life. She had moved forward, found new purpose, created a fresh start for herself and their daughter. Meanwhile, he remained trapped in the aftermath of his betrayal. His career stalled, his relationship toxic, his spirit diminished. With bitter certainty, Trent understood. This was justice. To live with the knowledge of what he had thrown away, while those he'd hurt found healing and purpose without him. Some mistakes, it seemed, offered no path to redemption. The results speak for themselves, Melody concluded, gesturing to the data projected behind her. After 18 months of targeted music therapy interventions, 83% of the children showed significant reduction in trauma symptoms, with particular improvement in emotional regulation and verbal expression. The audience of the National Therapeutic Arts Conference in Chicago listened intently, many taking notes as Melody explained the methodology that had transformed her small pilot program into one of the most innovative approaches to childhood trauma treatment in the country. What began as a modest initiative with 20 children in Seattle has now expanded to 6 school districts across Washington state, she continued, her confidence evident in her relaxed posture and clear gaze. With proper training and resources, this model can be implemented nationwide, reaching thousands of children currently underserved by traditional therapeutic approaches. At 34, Melody Hartwell had become a respected figure in the field of music therapy. Her research was published in leading journals, her program received substantial grant funding, and universities regularly invited her to speak about her pioneering work. The painful circumstances that had driven her from San Francisco to Seattle 5 years earlier had receded in public memory, overshadowed by her professional accomplishments. As the session ended and attendees approached with questions, Melody fielded each with thoughtful precision. This was her element now, discussing the work that had become both her passion and her healing. If anyone recognized her from the tabloid headlines of years past, they gave no indication. "Professor Hartwell," called a woman in a tailored blue suit. "I'm with the Johnson Foundation. We'd love to discuss potential funding for expanding your program to underserved rural communities." "I'd be delighted," Melody replied, exchanging contact information. "My team has been developing a distance learning component that might be particularly relevant for rural implementation." As the crowd thinned, Melody gathered her materials, checking her watch. She had promised to video call Lily before bedtime, a ritual they maintained whenever work required travel. At 5 years old, Lily had adapted remarkably well to her mother's occasional absences, secure in the routines they had established together. Melody smiled at the thought of her daughter's earnest face on the screen later, likely clutching her beloved stuffed otter while recounting the day's adventures with Grammy Elaine, who had flown from Portland to Seattle for babysitting duty. "Quite impressive," came a voice from behind her. "You've built something remarkable." Melody froze, the familiar timbre sending an electric shock down her spine. For a moment, she considered pretending she hadn't heard, simply walking away without turning. But 5 years of healing had given her strength she once couldn't have imagined. She turned slowly to face Trent Burnett. He looked different, thinner, with threads of silver at his temples that hadn't been there before. The confident posture remained, but something in his eyes had changed, a guardedness replacing the self-assured gleam she remembered. "What are you doing here?" Her voice remained steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I was invited to speak on urban redevelopment," he replied, maintaining a careful distance, "but I came early specifically to hear your presentation." The revelation that he had deliberately sought her out sent a wave of conflicting emotions through her: anger, confusion, an unwelcome flicker of something softer she refused to acknowledge. Why? The single word contained 5 years of questions. "I've followed your work," he admitted. "Your research publications, news about your program expansion. What you've accomplished is extraordinary." Melody gathered her laptop, buying time to compose herself. "I need to get back to my hotel. My daughter is waiting for my call." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of Lily. "How is she?" The audacity of the question nearly took Melody's breath away. "She's wonderful, brilliant, curious, kind. Everything you would know if you had chosen to be part of her life." Trent accepted the rebuke without defense. "I deserve that, and worse. I'm not interested in punishing you, Trent. That phase of my life is over." Melody shouldered her bag. "I need to go. Please," he said quietly. 10 minutes. There are things you should know, things I never explained. You explained everything perfectly clearly 5 years ago." The words came out sharper than she intended. "No, I didn't." His expression held an intensity that gave her pause. 10 minutes. Then I'll never approach you again if that's what you want." Melody considered walking away. She had no obligation to hear him out, no reason to reopen wounds that had finally healed. Yet something in his demeanor, a vulnerable earnestness so unlike the man she had known, made her hesitate. The lobby bar, 10 minutes, then I'm calling my daughter. 5 years earlier, Lily's birth had transformed Melody's world in ways both expected and surprising. After 36 hours of labor, the moment they placed her daughter on her chest had crystallized everything: her priorities, her determination, her capacity for love deeper than she had imagined possible. "She has your eyes," Elaine had whispered, wiping away tears as she looked down at her granddaughter. "That same curious expression, like she's taking in everything." Those first months in Seattle had been a blur of exhaustion and wonder. Nights of interrupted sleep, the steep learning curve of caring for a newborn while healing from childbirth and heartbreak, the gradual establishment of routines that brought structure to their new life. Melody had expected single motherhood to be challenging. What surprised her was the joy that threaded through the difficulties. Lily's first smile, her delighted discovery of her own hands, the unique language of coos and gurgles that evolved between them. By the time Lily turned 1, Melody had settled into her position at the University of Washington and begun developing the therapeutic program that would eventually become her professional signature. She worked part-time initially, balancing academic responsibilities with parenting, often writing research papers during Lily's naps or after her bedtime. The toddler years brought both challenges and delights. Lily's personality emerged, determined, observant, with a natural ear for music that validated every lullaby and impromptu song Melody had sung to her since birth. At 3, she joined a cooperative preschool where Melody occasionally led music sessions, watching with pride as her daughter confidently engaged with other children. Throughout it all, Trent remained absent, present only in the monthly deposits to Lily's trust fund and the occasional painful moments when Lily asked innocent questions about her father. "Do all kids have daddies?" she had asked at 4 after a playdate with a friend who had 2 parents. "Families come in all different shapes," Melody had explained, maintaining her commitment to honesty without burdening her daughter with adult complexities. "Some have a mommy and daddy, some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, some have just a mommy like us, or just a daddy. But I did have a daddy once." "Yes, your daddy lives far away. Doesn't he want to see me?" The question had pierced Melody's heart. Sometimes grown-ups make complicated choices, but his choices aren't about you. You are perfect and lovable exactly as you are. Whether the explanation satisfied Lily remained unclear, but she had nodded seriously before turning her attention back to her drawing, a family portrait featuring Melody, herself, Grammy Elaine, and Harper, the people who showed up consistently in her life. Those moments were the hardest, when Melody glimpsed the absence that would shape her daughter's understanding of herself, despite all her efforts to provide security and love. In those moments, the anger she thought she had processed would flare anew, directed at Trent for creating this void that even the most devoted mother couldn't completely fill. While Melody built her new life in Seattle, Trent's carefully constructed world in San Francisco had systematically unraveled. The relationship with Astrid, which had seemed worth sacrificing everything for, collapsed within a year of Lily's birth. The Embarcadero project, once positioned to be Burnett Pacific's crown jewel, suffered delay after delay. Cost overruns mounted. The Chen Group reduced their investment further, then withdrew entirely when another property development promised better returns. Astrid's ambitious design proved impractical for actual construction, requiring expensive modifications that destroyed its cohesive vision. As the project floundered, so did their relationship. What had begun as passionate intensity devolved into mutual resentment. Astrid blamed Trent for failing to protect her design integrity. Trent recognized too late that her interest had always been contingent on his usefulness to her career. The end came during a gala opening for another architect's project, a building that incorporated several elements Astrid had originally designed for Embarcadero. "You must be Trent Burnett," a silver-haired man had said, approaching them at the bar. "Richard Chen. We almost did business together." Trent had extended his hand automatically. "Mr. Chen, I wasn't aware you'd be here tonight." "James invited me," Chen replied, nodding toward the architect being celebrated. "Brilliant young man. Forward-thinking but practical. Exactly the combination we look for in partners." The implied criticism hung in the air between them. Beside Trent, Astrid stiffened. "I should introduce myself," she said, extending her hand to Chen. "Astrid Chambers. I was the original architect for the Embarcadero concept." Chen's expression remained politely neutral. "Ah, yes. Ambitious design. Perhaps too ambitious for actual implementation, unfortunately." "The implementation problems weren't with my design," Astrid countered, her professional smile tightening. "They stemmed from management failures." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps. In any case, we're quite pleased with our current investments, if you'll excuse me." As he walked away, Astrid turned to Trent, fury evident in her rigid posture. "You allowed him to blame my design for your inability to execute." "That's not what happened," Trent began, but she cut him off. "I've wasted enough time attached to a failing project and a man who can't deliver on his promises," she hissed, gathering her clutch. "We're done, professionally and personally. Astrid, don't contact me again. I'm joining Westridge Capital's design team next month. James recommended me personally." Her smile held no warmth. "Apparently not everyone thinks my vision is too ambitious." As she walked away, leaving him alone at the bar, Trent had experienced not disappointment, but a strange relief, as if a fever had finally broken, leaving him clear-headed for the first time in years. The professional fallout continued in the months that followed. The Embarcadero project was eventually scaled back dramatically, its ambitions downsized to match reduced funding. Burnett Pacific's stock value declined steadily. Desmond officially retired, but remained on the board. using his influence to further sideline his son while elevating Richardson to de facto leadership. By the time Lily turned 3, Trent had effectively been marginalized within his own company. Nominally executive vice president but excluded from major decisions, his office relocated from the executive floor to a smaller space 2 floors below. The man who had once commanded respect throughout San Francisco's business community found himself increasingly isolated professionally and personally. Former associates distanced themselves, sensing his diminished influence. Invitations to social events dwindled. Even Marcus, once his closest friend, maintained only minimal contact, their friendship irreparably damaged by Trent's abandonment of Melody. Left with abundant time for reflection, Trent finally confronted truths he had long avoided, about his father's toxic influence, about his own patterns of behavior, about the person he had become in pursuit of success as defined by others. Most painful was his growing awareness of what he had lost in Melody and Lily. As reports of Melody's professional success reached him through industry publications or mutual acquaintances, he recognized the enormity of his mistake. She had flourished despite his betrayal, building something meaningful that benefited vulnerable children while raising their daughter alone. Meanwhile, he had gained nothing and lost everything of genuine value. In the quiet corner of the hotel bar, Melody sipped sparkling water, hyper-aware of Trent sitting across from her. 5 years of imagined confrontations had not prepared her for the reality of this moment. "You look well," he said finally, breaking the tense silence. "Successful. Happy. I am." The simple truth required no embellishment. "My work fulfills me. Lily is thriving. We've built a good life. I'm glad." His sincerity seemed genuine. "You deserve that. Both of you." Melody studied him more carefully now. Beyond the physical changes, the weight loss, the premature gray, something fundamental had shifted in his demeanor. The calculating confidence had been replaced by something quieter, more reflective. "You said there were things I should know," she prompted, conscious of the promised 10 minutes ticking away. Trent nodded, his fingers tensing around his untouched scotch. "What happened 5 years ago, leaving you at the altar, was unforgivable. I know that. Then why are we here? What's the point of rehashing it?" "Because you deserve the truth, even belatedly." He met her gaze directly. "What I did wasn't just about Astrid, though that's what everyone assumed. There was something else I never told anyone." Melody's instinct for self-protection warred with unwilling curiosity. "What?" "A week before our wedding, I was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer." The words hung between them, so unexpected that Melody initially couldn't process them. "What?" "The prognosis was poor. 6 months, maybe a year with aggressive treatment." His voice remained steady, though emotion flickered behind his eyes. "I found out the day after the rehearsal dinner." Melody stared at him, searching for signs of deception but finding none. "You had cancer, and didn't tell me." "I couldn't." His gaze dropped to the table. "Couldn't face the thought of making you a widow while caring for a newborn. Couldn't bear the idea of Lily growing up with only memories of a sick father." The revelation sent Melody's mind spinning. "So your solution was to abandon us, to let me think you'd chosen another woman over your child. It seemed cleaner somehow, better for you to hate me than mourn me." A bitter smile crossed his face. The affair with Astrid provided a convenient explanation that made a clean break possible. "You let me believe a lie for 5 years." Anger rose in Melody's chest, hot and clarifying. "While I questioned what was wrong with me, what I had missed about you, you were actually making some noble sacrifice. Do you expect gratitude for that?" "No," he said quickly. "I expect nothing. I just thought you deserved to know that it wasn't about not loving you enough. It was about loving you too much to drag you through what I thought was coming. And the cancer. Obviously you survived. 6 months after I left, the tumors responded to treatment unexpectedly well. By the 8-month mark, I was in remission." His laugh held no humor. "The ultimate cosmic joke. I destroyed everything for a death sentence that was commuted." Melody pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to organize her thoughts. "Why tell me now, after all this time?" "Because I've spent 5 years watching you build an extraordinary life while carrying the pain I caused. Because Lily deserves better than thinking her father simply didn't want her." His voice softened. "And selfishly, because I couldn't bear the thought of dying without you knowing the truth." The final words jolted her attention. "Dying? The cancer's back?" Trent nodded slowly. 3 months ago. Metastasized to the liver. The treatment options are limited this time. Melody felt the ground shift beneath her. This man, once the center of her world, then the author of her deepest pain, sat before her not as the villain of her story, but as someone facing his own mortality. The realization complicated everything. "I'm sorry," she said finally, the words inadequate but sincere. "That's difficult news. It is what it is." His acceptance seemed genuine rather than performative. "I've had time to come to terms with it." A heavy silence settled between them, filled with unasked questions and unspoken regrets. Finally, Melody gathered her courage to ask what she truly needed to know. "Why didn't you contact me after you went into remission? When you realized you weren't dying after all?" Pain flashed across his features. "By then the damage was done. You had moved across the country, started a new life. The narrative was established. I was the heartless bastard who abandoned my pregnant fiancée. Coming back with a convenient cancer story would have seemed like manipulation, a way to weasel back into your life without consequences. So instead you just stayed away, let Lily grow up without a father. I convinced myself it was better that way, that she was better off without the complication of a part-time father who had hurt her mother so badly." He looked down at his hands. "I was a coward. Again." The brutal honesty disarmed her. For years, she had imagined Trent continuing his life with Astrid, untroubled by the pain he had caused. The reality that he had been alone, watching from a distance as she and Lily built their life without him, shifted something in her understanding of the past 5 years. "I need to process this," she said finally, rising from her seat. "This is a lot." "I understand." He remained seated, looking up at her with resignation. "Thank you for listening. That's more than I deserved." As she gathered her bag, a question nagged at her, one she wasn't sure she wanted answered but needed to ask. "Trent, is this true? All of it? Or is this another manipulation?" The hurt in his eyes seemed genuine. "It's true. Every word. I have the medical records if you want proof." Melody nodded slowly. "I'll need to think about what this means. If it means anything for us, for Lily, take all the time you need. I'll be in Chicago until Friday." He handed her a card with his hotel information. "If you want to talk again, if not, I understand." As Melody walked away, her mind whirled with conflicting emotions. If Trent was telling the truth, the narrative she had constructed to make sense of her abandonment, the story of a selfish man who chose ambition and desire over family, required radical revision. Yet 5 years of absence remained a fact, regardless of the initial motivation. In her hotel room, she dialed the familiar number, Lily's face appearing on the screen moments later, framed by dark curls and illuminated by the gap-toothed smile that never failed to center Melody in what truly mattered. "Mommy, guess what? Grammy and I made cookies shaped like dinosaurs." "That sounds amazing, sweetheart," Melody replied, pushing thoughts of Trent to the background as she focused on her daughter's excited chatter. Later, after Lily had been tucked in by Elaine, Melody stood at her hotel window, staring out at Chicago's glittering skyline. The revelation about Trent's cancer diagnosis had shaken foundations she thought solid. If he had truly been trying to spare her pain rather than inflict it, how should that change her understanding of the past 5 years? And what about Lily? Did she have the right to keep father and daughter separated if Trent's motives had been protective rather than abandoning? If he was indeed facing terminal illness now, would denying Lily the chance to know him, however briefly, be its own form of cruelty? No clear answers emerged as night deepened outside her window. Only questions, and the unsettling recognition that the narrative she had carefully constructed to make sense of her life's most painful chapter might require fundamental revision. Reaching for her phone, Melody hesitated before typing a message to the number on Trent's card. "I need proof. Medical records from 5 years ago and now. If you're telling the truth, we have more to discuss, for Lily's sake." His response came almost immediately. "Understood. We'll have records sent tomorrow. Thank you for considering this." Setting down the phone, Melody felt a strange combination of dread and something else. Not hope, exactly, but perhaps the tentative opening of a door she had thought permanently sealed. Whatever came next would require courage, careful judgment, and above all, consideration of what would best serve the bright-eyed little girl who deserved to know the truth about her origins, however complicated that truth might be. Morning light streamed through the hotel windows as Melody stared at the medical records spread across the bed. After her message to Trent, he had acted with surprising efficiency. A courier delivered a sealed envelope to her room before 9 a.m. containing comprehensive documentation of his alleged diagnosis and treatment. The papers looked authentic at first glance. Hospital letterhead, pathology reports, treatment protocols, all bearing Trent's name and details. Page after page chronicled a harrowing medical journey: initial diagnosis of stage 3 pancreatic cancer, grim survival statistics, aggressive treatment regimens, and then the unexpected: full remission after 8 months. The most recent records showed recurrence with metastasis to the liver, with a prognosis of 6 to 12 months. Something about the neat narrative bothered her. Perhaps it was the emotional whiplash of having to reconsider the past 5 years through this new lens. Or perhaps it was the lingering distrust born from profound betrayal. Whatever the cause, Melody couldn't quite bring herself to accept these documents at face value. She picked up her phone and called the one person whose judgment she trusted implicitly. "You're telling me he had cancer?" Harper's disbelief came through clearly despite the distance. "And that's why he left you at the altar?" "That's the most convenient excuse I've ever heard." "I know how it sounds," Melody admitted, "but the records look real. University Medical Center, Dr. Lawrence Chen as the oncologist. Dates that align with everything. And now it's conveniently back just when he happens to run into you at a conference." "That's what he claims." Melody sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I know I should be skeptical. After everything he did." "Damn right you should be skeptical," Harper interrupted. "Even if it's true, big if, it doesn't excuse abandoning you and Lily for 5 years. Having cancer doesn't prevent someone from making a phone call, sending a letter, or paying child support." "He did pay child support," Melody reminded her. "Generous support. Never missed a payment. Money is easy. Showing up is hard." Harper's voice softened. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Part of me thinks I should just walk away, continue our life without him, but Lily deserves to know where she comes from," Harper finished for her. "I get it. Just be careful, Mel. Verify everything before you make any decisions. People like Trent are master manipulators." After they hung up, Melody stared at the records again. Harper was right. Verification was essential. If Trent was lying, she needed to know before making any decisions about Lily's relationship with her father. With methodical precision, she began making calls. First to the medical center listed on the records, then to professional contacts in the healthcare field who might help interpret the documents. She took detailed notes, marking inconsistencies and questions for follow-up. By afternoon, she had compiled enough information to warrant a second conversation with Trent. She texted him to meet her in the hotel restaurant at 7 p.m., then spent the remaining hours preparing mentally for what might be the most important confrontation of her life. Trent arrived precisely on time, dressed simply in a grey sweater and dark slacks. The casual attire contrasted with his usual impeccable suits, making him appear more approachable and less like the powerful businessman she had once known. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as he sat across from her at the corner table she'd selected for privacy. Melody studied him carefully, searching for signs of deception in his posture, his expressions, the way his hands rested on the table. "I reviewed the records you sent. They're very thorough. I wanted you to have the complete picture." His voice held a quiet resignation. "I understand if you still have questions." "I do." She sipped her water, maintaining her composure. "I called University Medical Center today. They confirmed that a Dr. Lawrence Chen works in their oncology department." Trent nodded. "He's been my doctor throughout this journey." "So I've spoken with Dr. Chen's office. They couldn't discuss your specific case due to confidentiality, of course." She paused, watching him closely. "But they confirmed their record-keeping procedures." Something flickered across Trent's face, so brief she might have missed it if she hadn't been looking for it. Unease. They explained that all their official records use a specific patient identification system in the upper right corner. Melody reached into her folder and extracted one of the documents he'd provided. "Your records don't have these identifiers." "Administrative oversight, perhaps," Trent suggested, his voice carefully neutral. "These are copies, after all." "Perhaps." Melody withdrew another document. "I also consulted with a medical researcher friend about the treatment protocol listed here. She found it odd that you would have received this particular combination of drugs given the staging described." Trent's fingers tensed, almost imperceptibly on the table. "Medicine isn't my field. I followed my doctor's recommendations." "Of course," Melody continued her methodical approach. "I also noticed something interesting about the follow-up scans from last month. The radiologist's signature, Dr. Elaine Peterson, caught my attention because my mother's name is Elaine." She let the statement hang between them, watching as Trent maintained his composed expression with visible effort. "Out of curiosity, I checked whether Dr. Peterson works at University Medical Center." Melody's voice hardened slightly. "She doesn't. In fact, there's no radiologist by that name affiliated with the hospital at all." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusations. Trent's breathing had changed subtly, faster, shallower. "These records are fabricated, aren't they?" Melody finally asked, her voice quiet but firm. Trent held her gaze for a long moment before his shoulders slumped. The transformation was remarkable, the careful facade crumbling to reveal something raw and desperate beneath. "Not entirely," he admitted, the words barely audible. "The initial diagnosis was real. Everything else," he gestured vaguely at the documents. "Embellished. Embellished." Melody repeated the word, her tone flat. "You mean falsified, completely invented?" "The cancer was real," he insisted, "but it was stage 1, not 3, treatable. The prognosis was always good." The revelation hit Melody like a physical blow. Not only had he abandoned her and Lily, but now he had constructed an elaborate lie to justify his actions, playing on her compassion, manipulating her emotions yet again. "So there was never any noble sacrifice," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Just another lie to make yourself feel better about what you did. I needed you to understand." "Understand what?" Her composure finally cracked. "That you're capable of manufacturing medical records to continue manipulating me 5 years later. That you'd rather create elaborate fictions than simply take responsibility for your choices." Trent's expression crumpled. The truth seemed so inadequate. "That I panicked. That I wasn't ready for fatherhood. That I thought I wanted something else, only to discover how wrong I was when it was too late. And the recurrence, let me guess, completely fabricated." He nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I needed a reason to approach you, something that might make you willing to listen." A cold clarity settled over Melody. This man, who had once been the center of her world, who had fathered her child, was fundamentally dishonest. Not just in moments of weakness or fear, but as a core operating principle. He would craft whatever narrative served his purposes, regardless of truth or consequences. "Why did you really come to Chicago?" she asked. "What do you actually want?" Trent finally looked up, his expression devastatingly sincere. "A chance to know Lily, to be part of her life in whatever way you'd allow, to make amends, if that's even possible." The request pierced through Melody's anger. Despite everything, it touched the question she had wrestled with since learning of Trent's presence at the conference. Did Lily deserve to know her father, regardless of his flaws? "I need time to think," she said finally, gathering the falsified records and returning them to her folder. "This isn't just about you and me, it's about what's best for my daughter." "Our daughter," Trent corrected gently. The presumption reignited Melody's anger. "You forfeited the right to call her that when you chose to leave, when you signed away your parental rights, when you spent 5 years making no effort to know her." She stood, towering over him. "She is my daughter, mine. Any decision about your place in her life will be based solely on what benefits her, not what eases your conscience." As she walked away, leaving Trent alone at the table, Melody felt a strange mixture of emotions: rage at his continued deception, relief at having uncovered the truth, and beneath it all, a simmering determination to ensure he never hurt Lily the way he had hurt her. Back in her hotel room, Melody paced, her mind racing. The fabricated medical records represented a new level of manipulation, calculated, deliberate, designed to exploit her compassion. That Trent would go to such lengths demonstrated both his desperation and his fundamental dishonesty. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harper. "How did it go? Was I right?" Melody typed quickly. "Worse than we thought. The records are fake." He admitted it. Harper's response was immediate. "That calculating bastard. Are you okay?" Was she? The question gave Melody pause. Strangely, beneath her anger, she felt something unexpected. Power. For years, Trent had controlled the narrative, first by abandoning her, then by maintaining his distance, and now by attempting to manipulate her with an elaborate lie. But this time, she had seen through his deception. This time, she held the knowledge. "I'm better than okay," she replied to Harper. "I'm finally seeing things clearly." As she prepared for bed, a plan began to form in Melody's mind. Trent wanted access to Lily's life. He wanted forgiveness, redemption, a chance to rewrite his narrative from villain to flawed but well-intentioned father. His fabricated medical records proved how desperately he wanted this new story. Perhaps it was time to give him exactly what he wanted, on the surface, while ensuring he faced the full consequences of his choices. By morning, the outline of her plan had solidified. It required patience, careful execution, and a willingness to play a long game. But after 5 years of rebuilding her life from the ashes of his betrayal, Melody had developed precisely these qualities. At breakfast, she texted Trent, "I've been thinking about what you said. Despite everything, Lily deserves to know her father. We should talk about how that might work." His response came almost immediately. "Thank you. This means more than I can express. When can we meet?" "I fly back to Seattle this afternoon, but I'd be willing to consider a visit next month after I've had time to prepare Lily." They arranged to speak again in 2 weeks to discuss details. As Melody boarded her flight home, she felt a curious sense of calm. The path forward was clear now. Not forgiveness exactly, but something more complex. A reckoning that would finally balance the scales. Over the next month, Melody laid the groundwork methodically. First, gentle conversations with Lily about different kinds of families, about fathers who lived far away, about the possibility of meeting new people who were connected to her story. "Would you like to meet your dad sometime?" she asked one evening as they snuggled on the couch reading bedtime stories. Lily considered this with the serious contemplation of a 5-year-old. "Is he nice?" The question caught Melody off guard. "He wants to meet you very much," she answered carefully. "He lives in California, but he might visit us in Seattle soon. Would he stay with us?" "No, sweetheart, he would stay in a hotel, but you might spend some time with him while he's here. Would that be okay?" Lily nodded, already distracted by the next page of her book. "Can we finish the story now?" Simultaneously, Melody conducted thorough research, this time expanding beyond medical records to investigate Trent's current professional and financial status. What she discovered confirmed what she had suspected. His position at Burnett Pacific had been substantially diminished, though he maintained significant equity in the company. The Embarcadero project had finally been completed, but bore little resemblance to its original vision. His name appeared less frequently in business publications, and when it did, it was often in the context of rebuilding after earlier setbacks. Most interestingly, she uncovered a pending deal, Burnett Pacific's potential acquisition of a promising Seattle property development company. The merger would expand their presence in the Pacific Northwest and potentially revitalize their portfolio after years of stagnation. According to business news sources, final negotiations were underway, with an announcement expected within months. Melody also contacted her lawyer, reviewing the original parental rights agreement and exploring the implications of potentially modifying it to allow limited visitation. The attorney advised caution and suggested specific legal protections to ensure Lily's interests remained paramount. With each step, the plan crystallized further. When Trent called to discuss his potential visit to Seattle, Melody projected a carefully calibrated blend of cautious openness and maternal protectiveness. "I think it would be good for Lily to meet you in a controlled setting," she told him. "Perhaps a supervised visit at first, somewhere neutral like the park near our apartment." "That sounds perfect," Trent agreed eagerly. "I want to follow your lead on this. Whatever makes you and Lily most comfortable." His apparent willingness to accept her terms only strengthened Melody's resolve. The man who had once dominated every interaction, who had made unilateral decisions affecting multiple lives, now presented himself as compliant and accommodating. The transformation seemed too convenient to be genuine. As they finalized plans for his visit, Melody maintained her composed exterior while methodically advancing the next phase of her strategy. She contacted a respected investigative journalist who specialized in corporate profiles, suggesting a human interest story about music therapy programs for children. The conversation eventually turned to background information on Melody's career trajectory. I understand you were previously engaged to Trent Burnett of Burnett Pacific, the journalist noted. That must have been a difficult chapter. It was, Melody acknowledged. But it led me to where I am now, doing work I love and raising a remarkable daughter. Would you be willing to discuss that experience as part of the profile, adding personal context to your professional journey? Actually, Melody replied thoughtfully, I might have a more interesting story to share. Trent arrived in Seattle on a rainy Tuesday in October. The weather matched his nervous energy as he checked into his hotel, adjusted his tie in the mirror for the 5th time, and reviewed the small gift he had brought for Lily, a delicate silver music box that played Debussy's Clair de Lune, which Melody had once told him was the first piece she mastered on piano. He had spent weeks preparing for this meeting, consulting a child psychologist about how to approach a first encounter, reading books about connecting with school-age children, even practicing potential conversations. The stakes felt impossibly high. One misstep could destroy this fragile opportunity before it began. When he arrived at the designated park, Melody was already there, seated on a bench near the playground. She wore a simple blue coat, her hair longer than he remembered, her posture relaxed yet attentive as she watched a dark-haired little girl navigate the monkey bars with determined concentration. Lily, his daughter, the child he had never met, never held, never watched grow. The reality of her existence, no longer an abstract concept but a living, breathing person with Melody's delicate features and what might have been his determined chin, hit Trent with unexpected force. She looks like you, he said quietly as he approached the bench. Melody turned, her expression carefully neutral. She has your eyes and your stubbornness. The observation, not unkind despite everything, gave Trent a surge of hope. Perhaps redemption was possible after all. Perhaps with time and consistent effort he could earn a place in his daughter's life. Thank you for allowing this, he said, taking a seat beside Melody but maintaining respectful distance. I know I don't deserve the chance. This isn't about what you deserve, Melody replied evenly. It's about what Lily needs, a sense of where she comes from, even if it's complicated. She called to the little girl, who approached with curious hesitation. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. His green eyes set in Melody's heart-shaped face, a perfect blend of their features. Lily, this is Trent, Melody said, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact. He's your father, the one we talked about. The child studied him with disconcerting intensity. You live far away, she stated, not a question, but a confirmation of information previously received. I do, Trent acknowledged, in San Francisco, but I wanted very much to meet you. Why didn't you come before? The directness of the question, delivered without guile or accusation, left Trent momentarily speechless. That's a complicated question, he managed finally. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big ones. I made a mistake by not being part of your life until now. Lily considered this, then nodded as if filing away the information for later examination. Mom says you brought something for me. Trent smiled at the change of subject, retrieving the small wrapped package from his coat pocket. I did. It's a music box. Your mom once told me she loves this song. As Lily unwrapped the gift and discovered the mechanism to make it play, her serious expression gave way to delight. It's pretty. Mom, listen. The interaction that followed established a pattern for the visit. Moments of connection interrupted by Lily's natural caution, flashes of recognition as she identified traits they shared. You like blueberries too, and Melody's watchful presence maintaining clear boundaries throughout. By the end of the hour, Trent felt simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. The emotional complexity of meeting his child, of witnessing the life he had chosen not to be part of, left him raw and reflective. She's extraordinary, he told Melody, as they watched Lily return to the playground for a final turn on the swings before departing. Yes, she is, Melody agreed, her pride evident. No thanks to you. The gentle rebuke was deserved, but still stung. I know. I can never make up for the years I missed, but I'd like to try to be part of her life now if you'll allow it. Melody studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. We'll see. This was a good start, but Lily's well-being comes first. Any relationship with you needs to enhance her life, not complicate it. I understand. Trent hesitated, then pressed forward. Could we perhaps discuss this more over dinner? After Lily's bedtime? The suggestion hung between them. Not a date exactly, but a step toward the co-parenting relationship he hoped to establish. Melody considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'll meet you at Casino at 8. My mother will stay with Lily." The restaurant Melody selected projected understated elegance, sophisticated without being intimidating, with Northwest cuisine and a carefully curated wine list. Trent arrived early, securing a quiet corner table that offered privacy without isolation. When Melody entered, he was struck again by how she had evolved in the years since their separation, more confident, more self-possessed, her natural grace enhanced by an inner strength that hadn't been fully developed when he knew her. "You look lovely," he said as she took her seat. "Let's keep this focused on Lily," she replied, not unkindly but firmly establishing boundaries. "Today went well, but it's just a beginning." Trent accepted the redirect. "She's remarkably poised for 5. Intelligent, observant." "She is." Melody smiled with genuine warmth. "She's also musical, creative, and fiercely determined. Once she sets her mind to something, there's no dissuading her." "Like her mother," Trent observed, "in some ways." Melody studied him over her water glass. "She asks about you sometimes, why you've been absent from her life." The statement carried an implicit question. What will you tell her as she grows older? And her questions become more specific. "I've thought a lot about that," Trent admitted. "About what she should know about what happened. And the truth eventually. In age-appropriate ways." He met Melody's gaze directly. "That I made a terrible mistake. That it had nothing to do with her and everything to do with my own fears and failings." Melody nodded slightly, as if this answer satisfied some internal criteria. "I appreciate that. Children deserve honesty even when it's complicated." As they ordered and conversation progressed, Trent felt a growing sense that something had shifted in Melody's attitude toward him. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps a willingness to consider a new kind of relationship centered around Lily's needs. "I've been thinking," he ventured as they finished their main course, "about establishing a more formal arrangement, perhaps revising the original agreement to include regular visitation, obviously on your terms, with whatever safeguards you feel necessary." Melody considered this. "That's a significant step. What changed after 5 years of absence?" "I changed," Trent said simply. "Losing you and Lily, before I ever knew her, forced me to confront aspects of myself I'd avoided. My priorities, my values, the kind of person I want to be." "And who is that person?" Melody asked, her expression unreadable. "Someone who takes responsibility, who puts relationships above achievements, who understands that power and success are meaningless without connection." He hesitated, then added, "Someone who wants to be a father to his daughter, however belatedly." Something flickered across Melody's face, a complex emotion he couldn't quite identify. "Those are admirable aspirations. The other question is whether they represent genuine change or convenient adaptation to changed circumstances." "I understand your skepticism," Trent acknowledged. "I've given you every reason to doubt me. All I can ask is the chance to demonstrate consistency over time." Melody nodded slowly. "Time is exactly what's required. Lily deserves a father who shows up consistently, not one who appears and disappears according to his convenience." "I want to be that consistent presence," Trent insisted. "I'm prepared to restructure my professional life to make that possible. In fact, I've already begun." "Oh?" Melody's interest seemed to sharpen. "Burnett Pacific is expanding to Seattle. We're acquiring Summit Properties. You may have seen it in the business news. I'm positioning myself to oversee our Pacific Northwest division, which would mean relocating here at least part-time." "That's a significant commitment," Melody observed, something careful in her tone. "It is. But it's what Lily deserves. A father who prioritizes being near her." Trent leaned forward slightly. "I know I can't undo the past 5 years, but I can make different choices going forward." As the evening concluded, Melody agreed to consider a revised visitation arrangement, pending Lily's comfort with continued interaction. They parted with tentative plans for another meeting in 2 days, a longer visit, perhaps including lunch at Lily's favorite restaurant. Walking back to his hotel, Trent felt a cautious optimism. The meeting had gone better than he dared hope. Melody seemed willing to at least consider a path forward. Lily had responded to him with natural curiosity rather than fear or rejection. Perhaps, after years of wrong turns and painful consequences, he was finally finding his way back to what truly mattered. What Trent couldn't see was Melody's expression as she walked away, not the cautious openness she had projected during dinner, but a cold, calculated determination. Each interaction, each piece of information exchanged, had been carefully orchestrated to advance her plan. His revelation about the Burnett Pacific expansion into Seattle through the Summit Properties acquisition was particularly valuable, confirming what her research had already suggested and providing additional details about his personal involvement. In her apartment, after checking on Lily's peaceful sleep, Melody opened her laptop and composed a detailed email to the investigative journalist she had contacted earlier. The message included everything she had learned about the pending acquisition, along with copies of the falsified medical records Trent had provided and her documentation proving their fraudulent nature. Most importantly, it contained a time-stamped audio recording of their dinner conversation, where Trent had clearly stated his intention to relocate to Seattle to oversee the Pacific Northwest Division of Burnett Pacific, information that, when disclosed, would constitute a serious breach of confidentiality regarding the not-yet-announced acquisition. The email concluded, "While I initially approached you about a profile of my professional work, I believe this story of corporate manipulation and personal deception may be of greater public interest. I am willing to go on record about Mr. Burnett's pattern of dishonesty, including his recent fabrication of medical records to manipulate my sympathies. My only condition is that my daughter's privacy be respected throughout your reporting." After sending the message, Melody closed her laptop and poured herself a glass of wine. The plan was now in motion, not born from a desire for revenge exactly, but from a determination to protect Lily from the kind of pain she herself had experienced. A father who would fabricate a cancer diagnosis to gain sympathy could not be trusted with a child's vulnerable heart. Moreover, a man who had caused so much pain, who had walked away from his responsibilities so easily, deserved to experience similar consequences in the arena he valued most, his professional standing and reputation. This wasn't about healing her own wounds. Those had largely scarred over during the past 5 years of building a new life. This was about justice, about ensuring that actions had meaningful consequences, about protecting her daughter from a man who had proven himself fundamentally untrustworthy. In the quiet of her apartment, Melody felt neither triumph nor guilt about the events she had set in motion, just a calm certainty that balance would finally be restored. 3 days later, the story broke across multiple platforms, business publications, local Seattle news, and eventually national outlets. Burnett Pacific executive exposed, corporate leak, fabricated medical records and abandoned family, read the headline in one prominent business journal. The article detailed Trent's abandonment of his pregnant fiancée 5 years earlier, his recent attempt to re-enter her life through elaborate deception, including falsified medical records and, most damagingly, his disclosure of confidential corporate information regarding the pending acquisition of Summit Properties. The story included redacted copies of the fabricated medical documents and quotes from Melody about the experience of discovering the deception. "I was willing to consider co-parenting arrangements despite our difficult history," she was quoted saying. "But when I discovered he had falsified serious medical information to manipulate my emotions, I realized his patterns of deception made him fundamentally untrustworthy as a potential co-parent and apparently as a corporate executive." The fallout was swift and devastating. Summit Properties immediately withdrew from acquisition talks, citing breach of confidentiality and character concerns. Burnett Pacific stock dropped 12% in a single day. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to address what one member described as a catastrophic breach of professional ethics. By evening, Trent's hotel room phone was ringing constantly. His father, board members, reporters seeking comment. His cell phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from colleagues and legal counsel. His scheduled second visit with Lily had been cancelled via a terse text from Melody. In light of recent revelations, all contact suspended pending legal review. The carefully reconstructed professional standing he had been rebuilding for years, the tentative personal redemption he had been seeking with Melody and Lily, both collapsed simultaneously under the weight of exposed deception. At the emergency board meeting the following morning, conducted via secure video conference, the judgment was unequivocal. Desmond Burnett, emerging briefly from retirement to address the crisis, delivered the final assessment. The board has lost confidence in Trent Burnett's judgment and integrity. Effective immediately, he is removed from all operational roles within Burnett Pacific. As a family shareholder, he retains his equity stake, but will have no management authority or decision-making capacity. The corporate statement released to the press was equally direct. Burnett Pacific Holdings regrets the unauthorized disclosure of confidential corporate information and the apparent personal improprieties of Executive Trent Burnett. These actions do not reflect our corporate values of integrity, transparency, and ethical conduct. Mr. Burnett has been removed from his position while we conduct a thorough review of all operations under his previous supervision. Within 48 hours, Trent had lost his position, his professional reputation, and most devastatingly, the fragile opportunity to know his daughter. His carefully constructed world had collapsed not through external forces, but through exposure of his own fundamental character. Melody watched the unfolding events with calm detachment. She had anticipated most of it, though the speed and comprehensiveness of Trent's professional downfall exceeded even her expectations. There was no satisfaction in witnessing his destruction, only a sense that justice had finally been served. When his inevitable text came, "Please let me explain, this isn't what it seems," she did not respond. The explanation would be another construction, another narrative designed to elicit sympathy or understanding. She had moved beyond such manipulations. In the weeks that followed, she focused on what truly mattered: Lily's well-being, her continued growth, the security of their life together. The initial media interest eventually faded as newer scandals captured public attention. Melody's work with traumatized children continued to expand, her research gaining national recognition for its innovative approaches. The sound of Lily practicing simple melodies on the piano in their living room, concentration evident in her furrowed brow, small fingers finding patterns with increasing confidence, brought Melody more joy than any public vindication ever could. This was real, this was valuable, this was the life she had built from the ashes of betrayal. One evening, as autumn leaves fell outside their apartment windows, Harper called with an update. "Have you seen the news? Trent's officially resigned from Burnett Pacific's board. Apparently he's leaving San Francisco altogether. No one knows where he's going." "It doesn't matter," Melody replied, and was surprised to realize she meant it. Trent's whereabouts, his future plans, his eventual fate, none of it concerned her anymore. The scales had balanced. Justice, however imperfect, had been served. "What will you tell Lily when she's older?" Harper asked. "About all of this?" Melody watched her daughter across the room, absorbed in a drawing of what appeared to be a family. Two figures, one tall, one small, standing beneath a stylized sun. The truth, that her father made choices that revealed his character, that sometimes people who should love us fail us completely, and that those failures don't define us. They simply show us who we need to become for ourselves. As she spoke, Melody realized that her revenge, if that's what this had been, wasn't really about Trent at all. It was about reclaiming her own narrative, asserting control over a story that had once been wrested from her. It was about ensuring that her daughter would grow up understanding that actions have consequences, that truth matters, that some betrayals cannot be undone with convenient explanations or belated appearances. Most importantly, it was about declaring with absolute clarity, you don't get to walk back into our lives on your terms. You don't get to rewrite history to ease your conscience. You don't get to decide when and how you'll be a father after 5 years of absence. The revelation of Trent's dishonesty, his fabricated medical records, his corporate indiscretions, had been devastating not because it destroyed him professionally, but because it confirmed what Melody had suspected all along. His character had not fundamentally changed. The man who had abandoned his pregnant fiancée at the altar was the same man who would fake a cancer diagnosis to gain sympathy, who would leak confidential corporate information to advance personal goals. Some patterns ran too deep for redemption. "I don't regret exposing him," Melody told Harper, her voice steady and clear. "Lily deserves better than a father who constructs elaborate lies when the truth becomes inconvenient. She deserves honesty, consistency, reliability, even if that means growing up with only one parent." As night fell over Seattle, Melody helped Lily prepare for bed, listening to her daughter's prayers, which always included, "Bless Grammy and Aunt Harper and all the kids in my class." There was no mention of the father she had met briefly before he disappeared from her life again, this time permanently. Perhaps someday Lily would ask more questions about Trent, would want to understand the complicated history that had shaped her family. When that day came, Melody would tell her the truth, that sometimes the most loving choice a parent can make is to protect their child from those who cannot be trusted with something as precious as a child's heart. It wasn't the family story Melody had once imagined for herself, but it was honest, it was real, and most importantly, it was theirs. A story of resilience rather than victimhood, of choices made with clarity rather than desperation, of a love strong enough to protect itself from those who might damage it. In the end, that was a far better legacy than any revenge could provide. The years flowed by like water around stone, reshaping landscapes while leaving certain fundamentals unchanged. As Seattle's seasons cycled through rain and brief summers, Lily Hartwell grew from a curious 5-year-old into a thoughtful teenager, with her mother's artistic sensitivity and a determination that sometimes reminded Melody of her absent father. At 13, Lily possessed a striking blend of her parents' features, Melody's delicate bone structure combined with Trent's penetrating green eyes and strong jawline. Her natural musical ability had blossomed under her mother's guidance, though she favored the cello over piano, enjoying its deeper resonance and emotional range. "Mom!" Lily called from the living room of their Fremont neighborhood home, where she sat surrounded by scattered photographs. "I found this in the old album." Melody approached, immediately recognizing the image, one of the few she'd kept from her time with Trent. It showed them at a charity gala, his arm around her waist, both smiling with the unguarded happiness of people who believed their future was secure. "That's your father," Melody acknowledged, sitting beside her daughter. "Before you were born." "I know." Lily studied the photograph with analytical precision. "I Googled him again yesterday." This didn't surprise Melody. As Lily had grown older, her curiosity about her origins had intensified. The internet provided access to information that previous generations of children with absent parents could never have obtained so easily. "What did you find?" Melody asked, maintaining the open communication they had always prioritized. "Articles about the scandal, about how he tried to trick you with fake medical records." Lily's voice held no judgment, just the factual assessment of someone piecing together their personal history. "And older stuff about him leaving you at the wedding." Melody nodded, allowing her daughter space to process this information. They had discussed Trent's absence in age-appropriate ways over the years, but Lily was now old enough to understand the full complexity of what had happened. "There's not much about him after the scandal," Lily continued. "It's like he disappeared." "He left San Francisco," Melody confirmed. "Beyond that, I don't know much about his life now." This wasn't entirely true. Through occasional updates from mutual acquaintances, Melody knew that Trent had eventually relocated to Chicago, where he worked for a mid-sized development firm in a much reduced capacity. His professional rehabilitation had been partial at best, his reputation permanently tarnished by the dual scandals of personal dishonesty and corporate indiscretion. "Do you think he ever thinks about me?" Lily asked, the question carrying the weight of years of absence. Melody considered how to answer honestly, without burdening her daughter with adult complexities. "I'm certain he does. But sometimes people aren't capable of being the parents children deserve, not because of anything lacking in the child, but because of their own limitations." Like his problem with telling the truth, Lily's directness occasionally took Melody by surprise, though it shouldn't have. They had raised her to value honesty above most other virtues. "Yes, among other things." Melody gently took the photograph from Lily's hands. "Your father made choices that revealed fundamental aspects of his character. Those choices had consequences for his life, and for ours. Do you hate him?" The question was simple, but profound. "No," Melody replied after a thoughtful pause. "Not anymore. Hate requires energy I'd rather invest elsewhere. I stopped giving him that power a long time ago." Lily nodded, appearing to accept this perspective. "I think I might want to meet him someday. Not now, but maybe when I'm older. Would that be okay?" The question didn't surprise Melody. She had anticipated that Lily would eventually want to form her own assessment of the father who had been absent from her life. "When you're 18, if that's still what you want, I'll support your decision. You have the right to know your own story, including the parts that came before you." Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Melody sat at her desk reviewing notes for an upcoming keynote address at an international conference on childhood trauma interventions. At 42, her professional stature had grown beyond anything she might have imagined during those dark days following Trent's abandonment. The music therapy program she had pioneered had expanded nationally, with research centers at 3 major universities implementing her methodology. Her book on using creative expression to help children process trauma had become standard reading in graduate psychology programs. Most importantly, thousands of children had found healing through approaches she had developed. Success had come gradually, built on consistent work rather than dramatic breakthroughs. The same could be said for her personal healing, a steady, intentional process of rebuilding rather than a sudden transformation. Running her fingers over the embossed cover of her book, Melody reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. The betrayal that once seemed like the end of everything had ultimately redirected her towards something more meaningful than she might otherwise have found. Not that she was grateful for the pain, she would never frame it that way, but she had undeniably forged something valuable from it. 3 months later, Melody stood at a podium in Vancouver, concluding her presentation to the International Association for Child and Adolescent Mental Health. "The children we work with have often experienced profound betrayals of trust," she told the packed auditorium. "Our role isn't to erase those experiences, but to help transform them from defining wounds into integrated parts of a larger, richer narrative. When a child can say, 'This happened to me, but it isn't who I am,' true healing begins." As applause filled the room, Melody gathered her materials, energized by the engagement of colleagues who understood the importance of this work. The conference reception would begin shortly, offering valuable networking opportunities with potential international partners for her program. Making her way through the crowded hallway toward the reception area, she nearly missed him, a figure standing quietly by a pillar, watching her from a distance. Older, gray-haired now, but unmistakable. Trent. Their eyes met across the crowded space, his expression unreadable from this distance. For a moment, Melody considered simply continuing past, pretending she hadn't seen him, but curiosity and a strange sense of completeness, of a circle needing closure, made her change direction. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said as she approached, her voice neutral but not hostile. "I read about your keynote in a professional journal." His voice was older too, carrying a gravitas that hadn't been there before. "I'm working with a development firm that's partnering with a children's advocacy center in Chicago. Your work came up repeatedly in their program planning." The irony wasn't lost on Melody, that her professional path, born partially from his betrayal, would eventually intersect with his diminished career trajectory. "How is Lily?" he asked after a moment of awkward silence. "She's well. 13 now. Plays the cello beautifully." Melody offered this information deliberately, a reminder of all he had missed through his own choices. Trent nodded, pain flashing briefly across his features. "I see her in my mind sometimes, trying to imagine what she looks like, what she enjoys. I keep a copy of that one photo Marcus sent when she was born." The admission surprised Melody with its apparent sincerity. "She's curious about you," she found herself saying, "has been doing her own research. I imagine that's not flattering reading material. It's factual, which is what she deserves." Trent accepted this with a slight nod. "I've thought many times about contacting you, asking for photographs or updates, but after everything, it wouldn't have been appropriate," Melody confirmed. "Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt." They stood in silence for a moment, the busy conference continuing around them, attendees occasionally glancing at the keynote speaker, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. "What you did," Trent said finally, "exposing the fabricated records, the corporate information, it was justice. I see that now." The acknowledgement, delivered without qualification or excuse, caught Melody off guard. "It wasn't about revenge," she said after a moment. "It was about protection for Lily and for myself. I understand that now." His smile held no humor, only acceptance. "It took years of therapy to recognize the patterns in my behavior, the fundamental dishonesty that characterized so much of my life, the need to construct narratives that positioned me as either heroic or victimized, never simply responsible." The insight seemed genuine, though Melody maintained her emotional distance. "I'm glad you found that perspective. It's valuable, if belated. Too late for us, for me to know Lily. It wasn't a question, but a statement of acknowledged fact. Yes. Some choices can't be undone, only lived with. Trent nodded, accepting this truth without protest. I won't intrude on your conference further. I just wanted to see you, to say that you were right about everything. As he turned to leave, Melody felt compelled to offer one final piece of information, not for his comfort, but for the completion of truth between them. Lily mentioned she might want to meet you someday. When she's 18, if she still feels that way, it will be her decision. Hope flashed briefly in his eyes, quickly tempered by realism. 5 more years. If she chooses to contact me then, I'll be ready. With honesty this time. After he walked away, disappearing into the crowd of conference attendees, Melody experienced an unexpected sensation. Not forgiveness exactly, but a weight lifting. The encounter had provided something she hadn't realized she still needed. Confirmation that justice had been not just executed, but recognized. Acknowledged by the very person who had necessitated it. The most unexpected consequence of Melody's exposure of Trent's deception emerged 3 years later, when Lily turned 16. An email arrived from a woman named Caroline Burnett, introducing herself as Trent's half-sister and Lily's aunt. I've known about Lily's existence for years, Caroline wrote, but respected your distance from our family. Recently, my father Desmond passed away, and in reviewing his affairs, I discovered something that may interest you both. The revelation that followed transformed their understanding of the past. Desmond Burnett, the stern patriarch who had shaped Trent into the man who ultimately betrayed Melody, had been quietly funding an additional trust for Lily since her birth, separate from and larger than the court-mandated support Trent provided. More surprisingly, the accompanying letter from Desmond revealed that he had maintained anonymous donations to Melody's therapeutic music program from its inception, having recognized its value through regular updates he received about his granddaughter's life. My son made unforgivable choices, the letter concluded. I bear responsibility for the values I instilled in him. This support cannot undo the damage, but perhaps it can advance the remarkable work you've built despite, or perhaps because of, the pain he caused. The discovery prompted complex emotions in both Melody and Lily. The man they had understood as a distant, disapproving figure had apparently maintained a silent connection to their lives through financial support that had helped expand Melody's program to reach thousands of children. Do you think Grandad Burnett regretted how he raised my father? Lily asked as they discussed this development over dinner. I think people are more complicated than we sometimes allow them to be, Melody replied, still processing this shift in her understanding. Even those who cause great harm can harbor recognition of their mistakes, even if they can't express it directly. The revelation didn't change the past, but it added dimension to a narrative that had seemed settled. Like a musical piece gaining unexpected depth through a newly discovered countermelody, the story of their lives expanded to include this strange, posthumous connection. On Lily's 18th birthday, Melody watched with quiet pride as her daughter performed a solo cello piece at her senior recital. The young woman on stage bore traces of both her parents. Melody's gentleness and Trent's intensity combined into something entirely her own. After the performance, amid celebration with friends and family, Lily approached her mother with uncharacteristic hesitation. I've made a decision, she said, about contacting him. Melody nodded, having anticipated this moment. And? I'm going to wait, Lily said, surprising her. I thought I needed to know him to understand myself better, but watching you these past few years, seeing how you've helped so many children heal from experiences much worse than mine, I realized something important. What's that, sweetheart? Our stories aren't defined by those who leave, but by those who stay. Lily smiled, her father's green eyes bright with her mother's warmth. Maybe someday I'll want to meet him, but right now, I know exactly who I am and where I come from. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Lily had gone out with friends to continue celebrating, Melody sat alone in their garden. Seattle's rare perfect summer evening enveloped her as she reflected on the long, unexpected journey from abandoned bride to the life she now led. The betrayal that had once defined her had gradually diminished in significance, becoming merely one chapter in a much larger story. A painful chapter, certainly, but no longer the central plot point around which everything else revolved. What remained was not the absence created by Trent's departure, but the presence she had built in its wake. Her work, her relationships, the daughter who carried the best of both her parents while transcending their limitations. As twilight deepened into night, Melody felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with forgiveness or forgetting. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become integrated into a life of meaning and purpose. Some betrayals cannot be undone, but they can be transformed, their energy redirected toward creation rather than destruction. In the quiet garden, surrounded by plants she had nurtured from seedlings, Melody understood with perfect clarity. This was her true revenge against betrayal, not the exposure of Trent's deception years ago, but the joyful, purposeful life she had created despite it. A life defined not by what had been taken from her, but by what she had built in its place. It was, she realized, the most powerful response possible to abandonment. Not merely surviving, but flourishing. Not just healing, but transforming. Creating from the ashes of betrayal something so beautiful and meaningful that the original pain, while never forgotten, was finally completely transcended. If this story touched your heart, and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.